My name's Leo, I'm 32, and for most of my adult life, I've played the role of the reliable one, the dependable brother, the cool-headed son, the guy who never made a fuss, even when I probably should have. My parents, well, mostly my mom, loved to say I was low maintenance. That was code for, we can ignore him and he won't complain. I didn't come from a bad family, just one that had a very specific idea of what a family member should look like, and I didn't quite fit the mold. My older sister, Ava, was the golden child. She's 35, married to a man with a forgettable name and an even more forgettable personality, and has 2 kids who I rarely see outside of Instagram posts. My parents practically idolize her. She could burn down a house, and they'd find a way to blame the matchmaker. I, on the other hand, was always Leo, the bachelor. Leo, the artsy one. Leo, the one who does something with design or photography or computers. Despite running a successful freelance graphic design business and owning my own apartment in the city, I was still treated like the teenager who never grew up. The quiet one. The one they didn't really know how to talk to at family dinners. This brings me to the wedding. Not mine, of course. Ava's vow renewal ceremony. Because apparently one wedding wasn't enough. No, she needed a beachfront ceremony, a catered dinner, custom flower arches, and a professional photographer to mark 5 years of marriage. It's symbolic, she told me when I asked why she was spending more than most people's down payments on a party for a marriage that wasn't even new. It's about commitment. And it's a great excuse to get the family together. Ava had called me 2 months prior and said she needed my help. That phrase alone should have been a red flag. She said, "I know you're really good with all that creative stuff. Can you help me with the invites? And maybe some photo editing afterward? Also, we're trying to keep the budget tight, so if you could pitch in for the photographer, that'd be amazing. You'll get credit on the site too." She said it like she was offering me a business opportunity, not asking me to drop $4,000 for a man holding a camera. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew my refusal would spark drama. I could already hear my mom sighing over the phone, saying things like, "Ava would do it for you," even though we both knew that was laughable. So I said yes. I wired the money. I designed her invites from scratch. I customized a floral monogram, coordinated the RSVP site, and I even offered to help with the setup on the big day. No thank you card. Not even a shout out. Just a casual, "Thanks, Leo," in a group text sent at 11 p.m. The venue was beautiful, I'll admit that. A rented estate overlooking the ocean, sun setting just in time for golden hour, and string lights draped over the tables like something out of a Pinterest board. People were dressed in white and beige, her aesthetic. I wore a navy blue suit, which got me some subtle side eyes from her bridesmaids, but I let it slide. I always let it slide. That night, something shifted. I was standing near the drink station, sipping from a cheap glass of wine while watching the chaos unfold around me. People laughed and mingled. Ava posed with her kids and in-laws. I caught my parents sitting with Ava's in-laws, doting over the grandkids and talking about how perfect everything turned out. I hadn't been invited to sit with them at dinner. My name card had been mysteriously placed at the kids' table. No joke. A few of them weren't even potty trained yet. I didn't complain. I just quietly picked up my plate, walked over to an empty table near the back, and ate in peace. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe it was a mistake. I told myself that to keep from feeling that old, familiar sting in my chest. After dinner came the photos. The photographer began calling for family groupings. "Bride's family, please," he announced, motioning for everyone to gather near the flower arch. Ava waved everyone over. My mom, dad, Ava's kids, her husband, even a few distant cousins I barely recognized. I stood up and started walking over, only to feel a gentle tug on my elbow. It was Ava. She leaned in, gave me that tight, fake smile she reserved for uncomfortable moments, and whispered, "Hey, maybe just sit this one out? It's kind of just immediate family." I blinked. "What?" She kept smiling, like nothing was wrong. "You know what I mean," she said softly. "We don't want to confuse the layout. Plus, you'll be in the ones with everyone later, I promise." I stood there for a second, stunned. She walked off before I could reply, already fixing her hair and adjusting the flower in her daughter's headband. My stomach dropped. My face felt hot. I slowly backed away and watched as the group formed neatly without me. Mom stood right in the middle, beaming. Dad had his arm around Ava's husband. Everyone looked so complete. That was when Ava glanced back at me again. Just for a second. Just long enough to lean slightly toward me and whisper something across the breeze. I barely caught it, but I did. You're not really part of this family. That was it. Just a whisper. No venom in her voice, no cruelty. Just a quiet truth from her lips to my ears, like she was saying something obvious. Like she thought I already knew. And maybe I did. I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't cause a scene. I just stood there, frozen in that moment, my heart thudding in my chest like a slow drumbeat. The group posed, the camera clicked, and the moment passed. Until the photographer turned and asked loudly, "Who's handling payment, by the way?" Everyone turned. Ava looked around, confused. My mom tilted her head like she'd forgotten something. That was when I took one step forward, still calm, still quiet, and said, and that's exactly when everything began to shift. I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The photographer looked relieved. Ava's eyes widened for just a second before she smoothed her expression over with a saccharine smile, the kind she used whenever someone she disliked was watching. "Oh, right," she chirped, walking over quickly. "Leo was just helping out a bit with the vendor stuff. He's good at that kind of thing. Aren't you, Leo?" She gave me a light pat on the shoulder and a side glance that said, "Don't make a scene." I didn't reply. I just nodded and turned toward the photographer. "Send the invoice directly to me," I told him, handing him my business card. "This whole shoot's on me." I walked off after that. I didn't want to watch them shuffle back into poses, now with slightly more awkward smiles. I sat down by the garden wall, beneath one of the twinkling lights Ava had insisted on renting, and stared at the sea while my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. I knew it was probably a half-hearted thank you text in the family group chat. Or worse, radio silence, because they'd moved on. Because I wasn't in the picture. Literally and figuratively. But the truth is, that moment cracked something open. And once the crack started, it was impossible to ignore how wide it really ran. 2 days later, I got a call from my mom. No hello. Just, "Hey, can you come over this weekend? We're doing a family brunch. Ava's planning it. And she says you can help with setup again." "No, thank you for the photographer." "No, how are you? Just another task." I paused. "I'm not available this weekend." She sighed heavily. "Leo, don't be difficult. Your sister is doing a lot right now. She's overwhelmed. The least you could do is help her out a bit." "The least I could do," I repeated slowly. "You don't have kids, Leo. You don't have a family to take care of. You have time." She said it like it was a fact. Like I was a resource, not a person. "I run a business," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "I work long hours, Mom." "Oh, that freelancing thing? Can't you just reschedule?" "That freelancing thing." The words hung in the air. I bit the inside of my cheek hard. "I can't, Mom. I won't." She was quiet for a moment. Then, with a tone she reserved for guilt-tripping, she muttered, "Fine. I'll tell Ava. But don't be surprised if she's upset." She hung up before I could reply. The next week, I got a text from Ava. "Heard you're too busy to help with brunch. Hope the business is going well, upside down face." The emoji made it worse. Passive-aggressive, dismissive, smug. It didn't stop there. At the next family event, Dad's birthday, I arrived with a framed custom poster I'd made of one of his favorite vintage cars. I'd spent hours designing it. I even had it printed and mounted professionally. When I handed it to him, he gave me a polite smile and said, "Thanks, son." Then he leaned over and picked up a Bluetooth speaker Ava had gotten him and exclaimed, "Now this is useful. Look at this thing. It even lights up." I stood there, holding the wrapping paper in my hands while everyone gathered around Ava's gift and ignored mine, still resting on the table behind them. During dinner, I tried to talk about a project I was working on, a rebrand for a startup that had just gotten series of funding, but every time I started, someone interrupted me. "Have you seen Ava's new backyard? They're adding a fountain. Did you know Ava's youngest is already reading full sentences? She's 3. Ava's thinking of launching a blog. It's going to be all about parenting and lifestyle tips. She has such a natural gift for it." I sipped my wine and said nothing. Again, later that evening, I offered to help clean up. My mom handed me a garbage bag, nodded toward the backyard, and said, "Start with the recycling out there. And don't take the shortcut through the living room. Ava's trying to film something for her Instagram." Like I was the hired help. Like I didn't belong in the family space. Like I was a shadow slipping around the edges of their real lives. By the time I got home that night, something had shifted completely. It wasn't just the vow renewal. It wasn't just Ava's whisper. It wasn't just the way Mom dismissed my business or the way Dad ignored my gift. It was all of it. Every quiet slight. Every moment I was made to feel like an extra in my own family. Every time I gave and got less than nothing in return. I'd always swallowed it. Always told myself they don't mean it. That they're just distracted. That this is just how families are. But that wasn't true. They meant it. Maybe not maliciously. Maybe not consciously. But they meant it. To them, I was a convenient helper. A wallet when needed. A tool to check things off their list. Never a priority. Never a centerpiece. Never even in the picture. And I realized I'd been paying, emotionally and literally, for the privilege of being excluded. That's when I decided something needed to change. But first, I had to play the role a little longer. Just long enough to gather a few pieces. Just long enough to get close to something they didn't know I was looking for. Just long enough to find the moment I'd step forward again. Not just as the guy footing the bill, but as the one holding all the strings. And when that moment came, I wouldn't just be in the picture. I'd be the one framing it. The moment came 2 months later, quietly, unexpectedly, and with a sting I didn't see coming. My cousin Becca was getting married, and for once, someone in the extended family actually remembered to send me a proper invitation. The kind that wasn't just an afterthought. I RSVP'd, bought a nice suit, and was even looking forward to it. Until I got the email. It was from Ava. Subject, quick favor. Body. Hey Leo. So Becca's wedding is coming up, yay. I know you're already going, which is perfect. We're throwing her a surprise bridal brunch the day before at Mom and Dad's, and I need help with the decor and photos. You're so good at those things, and honestly, I don't trust anyone else to make it look right. Can you come by early? Also, if you still have that nice DSLR, bring it. The real photographer is only coming for the ceremony. No mention of payment. No offer of help. Just another assignment wrapped in faux praise and emojis. I stared at the message for a long time. And despite everything, despite how I'd been treated, despite knowing better, I replied, "Sure, I'll be there." Because I'd already begun playing a longer game. One where patience was my best weapon. I showed up early, like she asked. I brought my gear. I took the photos, arranged the centerpieces, and stayed late to help Mom clean up while Ava flitted around taking selfies with Becca and making sure every angle of her outfit looked perfect on camera. It felt like old times. Which is to say, I was invisible again, but smiling through it. Becca's wedding was beautiful. Simple, heartfelt. Not $1,000 extravaganza like Ava's vow renewal, but there was so much warmth in the air it made up for everything. I snapped a few casual shots from my seat, just because I liked doing it. No pressure this time. That night, as I was unwinding at home, I got a notification from Instagram. Ava in Bloom posted a new photo. Curious, I clicked. It was one of the shots I'd taken, Becca and her new husband under the ceremony arch, laughing, sun hitting just right. A beautiful moment. But the caption? The caption stopped me cold. Captured this special moment on Becca's big day. So glad I brought my camera. #wedding vibes, #photographer life. I blinked. Read it again. She was taking credit. She was taking credit for my work. Not just a repost. Not a tag. Not a thanks to my brother. She'd uploaded the photo, watermarked it with her own name, and posted it as if she'd taken it. And not just one. There were 6 more photos in the same post. All mine. All reframed just slightly, cropped enough to avoid suspicion, but undeniably my shots. I recognized the way I composed the angles. The edits. The way I played with light. I didn't know what stung more. The theft or how casual it was. Like she didn't even think I'd care. I messaged her. Hey, saw your new post. Those are my pictures. She replied 5 minutes later. Ava, oh come on Leo. It's Instagram. Don't be petty. You take photos for fun, right? I thought you wouldn't mind. I just stared at the message. My hands trembled, not with rage, but with a kind of bone-deep hurt I hadn't expected. She thought I wouldn't mind. Because she assumed I had nothing to lose. Because in her eyes, my time, my work, my craft, it was all disposable. It wasn't about Instagram. It wasn't even about credit. It was about the message underneath it all. You don't matter enough for me to ask. I didn't respond. I couldn't. But that night, I pulled up my hard drive. I looked through the files I'd saved, every design I'd done for her vow renewal, every invite I'd customized, every filtered and corrected photo from that day. And I remembered something. The website. Months ago, When Ava had asked me to help out with the RSVP site, she'd wanted something cheap, free. So I set her up with a simple template using a domain I owned, avaandmichael.com. I offered to transfer it to her later, but she never followed up. She never asked about it again. It was still under my account, still mine. I logged in and checked the analytics. Hundreds of visitors still clicked through the gallery link. All my photos, my work, my designs, and her name plastered on all of it. The domain wasn't set to auto-renew. The expiration date was in 3 weeks. I stared at the screen, my mind suddenly clear. Cold. Calculating. Ava had built a little digital shrine to herself using my time, my money, and my creativity, without ever saying thank you, without ever treating me like more than a tool. And she had no idea the foundation was built on a thread I could cut with a single keystroke. But I didn't press it. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about payback. It was about pulling back the curtain, letting the whole house of cards fall. And for that, I needed to wait just a little longer, until the moment when the show had to go on. But I wouldn't be backstage anymore. I'd be holding the spotlight. The days after that post were the quiet kind of miserable, the kind where nothing explodes, but everything just hurts. I didn't speak to Ava, didn't bring it up with my parents. I told myself it wasn't worth the drama. But deep down, it festered. Not just because she took credit for my work, but because I realized something darker. No one was going to defend me. A week after the wedding, I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd kept up since before I could drive. I almost didn't go, but part of me still clung to this naive hope that someone would say something. That maybe Ava would apologize. That maybe mom or dad would pull me aside and ask, "Hey, is everything okay between you two?" But all I got was silence. They were laughing when I arrived. I could hear Ava's voice from the kitchen before I even opened the door. "She really thought the photographer took those," she was saying between chuckles. "I mean, it's not like it's that hard to use a camera. Anyone can do it." My stomach dropped. Becca. She was talking about Becca. I stood in the doorway for a second too long, and Ava finally noticed me. She blinked, then smiled brightly, like the conversation hadn't just gutted me. "Hey, Leo. We were just talking about your photos. They were a huge hit." "Your photos?" I echoed. "Yeah," she said, completely missing it. "Anyway, you should have seen Becca's face. I told her I'd edited them with your presets." "Close enough, right?" I nodded once, walked past them without a word, and sat down at the table. Dinner was normal, painfully so. No one asked how my business was doing. No one mentioned the vow renewal, or Becca's wedding, or anything about the site or the photos. It was like none of it had ever happened. At one point, Dad asked me to pass the salt and then turned to Ava. "So, about your blog. When are you launching it?" She smiled. "I'm hoping next month. Michael said we might invest in some better equipment." "Oh, and Leo's going to help with the branding, right?" Everyone turned to me. I looked at her, stunned. "What? You said you'd help with the logo and stuff. Remember?" "No," I said calmly. "I didn't." She blinked, then tilted her head. "Well, I mean, we talked about it. And I figured. I didn't agree to anything." The table went quiet. My mom jumped in. "Leo, don't be so rigid. You're so good at these things. Why wouldn't you want to help your sister?" "She can hire someone," I said flatly. "Like everyone else does." There was a pause. I could feel the shift in the air, the tightening of jaws, the exchanged glances. My mom's voice dropped a notch. "You don't have to be rude about it." I put down my fork and looked around the table. No one met my eyes. "I'm not being rude," I said. "I'm setting a boundary." Ava scoffed. "Okay, therapy talk." That was it. I stood up, took my plate, and walked it to the kitchen. My chest was tight. My hands were shaking. I rinsed the dish like I'd done 100 times before. Put it in the dishwasher. Dried my hands on the towel. And then I left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't wait for them to ask where I was going. No one followed. I got in my car, drove back to my apartment, and sat in the parking lot for a long time with the engine running. My phone buzzed once. "Mom, please don't make this into a big thing. Ava's under a lot of pressure right now." I didn't reply. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. No muffled arguments, no clattering plates, no toddler screaming about juice. Just the hum of my refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. It should have been peaceful. It felt like grief. And in that grief, something hardened. I pulled up my email and opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. Ideas for a new portfolio site. I had templates, color palettes, half-finished concepts. All work I'd set aside to help Ava with hers. I stared at the folder for a long time, then opened another, screenshots I'd been saving. Every design I'd done for Ava. Every post she'd taken credit for. Every message she'd brushed off. Even my bank records from the photographer payment. I didn't know why I'd started collecting them back then. Now I did. It wasn't about revenge yet. Not entirely. It was about reclaiming something. Not just my work, but myself. The next morning, I didn't return my mother's call. I didn't respond to Ava's text about rescheduling our chat about her logo. I didn't answer when my dad sent a generic thumbs-up emoji in the family group chat after Ava posted a teaser for her blog with another one of my pictures. Instead, I opened the domain registrar. avaandmichael.com. Status: expires in 14 days. Auto-renew, OFF. I hovered my mouse over the renewal button. Didn't click it. Then I started a timer on my phone. 13 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes. Let her build. Let her link it everywhere. Let her post one more story about how grateful she is for her success. Because this time, when the curtain fell, I'd be the one standing center stage. The days that followed were some of the quietest I'd experienced in years. And, oddly enough, the most productive. Without the background noise of my family's demands. Without the constant obligation to show up, give, contribute, smile, I had space. I poured myself into my work, but this time, it wasn't from a place of escapism. It was clarity, focus, purpose. I picked up a few high-end clients through referrals, redesigned 2 entire websites for small businesses in LA, and even got approached by a boutique marketing agency interested in contracting me long-term. I didn't brag. I didn't post about it. I just worked. Quietly, intentionally. At night, I would sit at my desk with a cup of tea and watch the timer tick down on avaandmichael.com. 13 days became 10, then 7. Every day, the site got more bloated with Ava's blog plans. New tabs appeared: parenting, lifestyle, shop Ava's favorites. I recognized every design element because I had built them. Then came the real irony. She emailed me. Subject: urgent, domain transfer needed. Hey Leo, so I've finally started adding blog posts. Eek. And Michael says we should really move the domain over to our own account before launch. I know you set it up under your stuff, but can you just send me the login info or whatever we need? I can Venmo you $20 if it costs anything, LOL. I stared at it for a long time. Not thank you. Not, I appreciate all the time and effort you put into this. Not even can I please. Just, I can Venmo you $20. As if everything I'd done, all the hours I'd poured into her vanity project, could be reduced to a $20 transfer and a casual LOL. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new project file, my own site. My portfolio. I used the color palette I'd originally reserved for Ava: deep charcoal, gold highlights, soft white backgrounds. Clean, confident, mature. I titled the front page simply, Leonard Gray Visual Identity Architect. Not freelance designer. Not brother who does artsy stuff. A visual identity architect. Because that's what I did. I built how people saw you. And it was about time I built myself. A few days later, a former client of mine, a wedding planner, reached out in a panic. Her photographer had canceled last minute for a destination wedding in Italy. She remembered the photos I'd taken at Ava's vow renewal, which I had posted on my separate photo account, and asked if I'd be willing to fill in. I hesitated. It was a 10-day commitment. The pay was generous. The exposure even more so. But it meant disappearing completely, right as Ava's timer hit 0. I said yes. I packed my gear, boarded a flight to Florence, and for the first time in years, felt like I was living my life, not just reacting to everyone else's. The wedding was stunning. I shot on film and digital. I got compliments from the couple, the planner, and even the venue owner, who asked for my card. One of the guests turned out to be a partner at a design firm in Amsterdam. We talked over espresso, and by the end of the night, he'd asked if I'd be open to a cross-continental collaboration. I told him I'd think about it. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I already had what I needed: control, momentum, and a growing list of people who saw my value without needing to be related to me. When I flew home, it was the night before the domain expired. I unpacked my bags, set down my camera, and opened the registrar one last time. avaandmichael.com. Expires in 9 hours, 44 minutes. My inbox was a mess of unread messages from Ava. Hey, I really need this domain thing fixed. Leo, seriously, please don't be difficult. I have my launch scheduled for Thursday. Michael is furious. Why are you doing this? Then one from Mom. Please just give your sister what she needs. You know how important this is to her. Of course. Always about how important things were to Ava. But no one asked how important anything was to me. I closed the email tab. Instead, I opened a new one, to Becca. She'd recently messaged me on Instagram, thanking me for the candid shots I'd taken at her wedding, after she found out Ava hadn't taken them after all. She'd even offered to pay me. I refused the money, but asked her for a favor. Becca was still in the extended family group chat, the one Ava wasn't in. I typed, "Hey, I've been working on something. I'd like to share it with everyone. Would you mind posting a link to my new portfolio in the family group chat tomorrow morning?" She replied within minutes. Absolutely. About time they saw what you can really do. I smiled. Then I reopened the registrar. The mouse hovered over the Renew button one last time. But I didn't click it. Instead, I opened a new domain registrar tab and bought something else. avanmichael.blog, $12. I own the name now, not because I wanted to use it, but because I knew what would happen when her old site went dark. When the links she'd posted on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and that podcast interview she'd done all pointed to nothing. When the illusion crumbled, I wasn't going to humiliate her. I wasn't going to shout or expose or destroy. I was just going to quietly pull the plug. Let the silence speak. Let the house fall. Because when people ignore the one holding the foundation, they forget how easily that person can walk away and take everything with them. I slept better that night than I had in months. There was a strange peace in knowing the clock was ticking, not against me, but for me. Every hour that passed brought me closer to something I never thought I'd feel with my family. Control. Not the kind that comes from shouting or making threats. No, the quiet kind. The kind that comes when people realize too late that they've mistaken kindness for weakness and generosity for obedience. That morning, Becca kept her word. At exactly 9 a.m., she posted my new portfolio link in the family group chat with a simple message. Check out Leo's new site. He's the one who did the graphics and photos for Ava's wedding site. It's insane how good he is. Honestly, the best in the family. I wasn't in the group chat, but she forwarded me the replies. My mom responded first. "Oh wow, this looks so professional. Leo, I didn't realize you did all this yourself." Then a cousin I hadn't seen in years. Wait, Leo designed all of Ava's stuff? I thought she hired a firm. And then the one that changed everything, Ava's mother-in-law, Sharon. Michael told me Ava was working with a branding consultant. This looks 100x better than what she paid for. Why isn't this on her site? I nearly laughed. By noon, Ava was blowing up my phone. "What did you do? Why is everyone saying you made my site? You're making me look like a liar. Fix this." I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because by then, something else had started happening. While everyone was discovering what I could do, I was discovering something, too. Becca, ever the gossip pipeline of the family, had started sharing little details with me. Tidbits she'd heard at brunches and birthday parties I hadn't been invited to. Normally, I'd brush them off, but this time, one thing caught my attention. Apparently, Ava was pitching her new blog as a business, not just a hobby. She had already reached out to 2 local mom-focused companies for sponsorship. Her big, soft launch was scheduled for the weekend. She planned to drop links to her site, post a video walkthrough of her blog sections, and do a giveaway to attract subscribers. The only problem? She'd printed the wrong domain on every promotional card and gift bag. All 500 of them. avanmichael.com. Becca had seen them. She even sent me a picture. The cards were beige with gold script and little fake wax seals. I had to admit, they looked good. Elegant, tasteful. Exactly what I would have designed if she'd asked. But that was just it. She never asked. And now, because of that, every piece of promo material she planned to hand out this weekend led straight to a dead link. Unless, I typed the address into my browser. avanmichael.com. Status, expired. Available for purchase. I bought it again. $18. Just like that, the digital foundation of her blog, the site she'd linked in bios, printed on merchandise, sent to sponsors, was back under my control. I didn't plan to humiliate her. This wasn't going to be some petty takedown with glitter fonts and dancing frogs. I had something else in mind, something quieter, more elegant. I created a single landing page. White background, simple serif font, and one line in the middle. This site has been retired by the original designer. Please contact leonardgray.co for design inquiries. No insults. No names. Just the truth. It wasn't about Ava anymore. It was about me. Later that night, as I finalized the page, I got a DM on Instagram from someone I didn't know. At Themodern Mom Network. Hey Leo, we came across your site today. Your design work is incredible. Are you currently taking on new clients? I clicked their profile. Over 60K followers. A verified badge. A mix of parenting content, lifestyle tips, and interviews with female entrepreneurs. I'd seen Ava tag them before in her posts, always with the hope of getting featured or maybe even picked up as a contributor. I responded, "Thanks. I am." We scheduled a video call for the next morning. I didn't tell Ava. I didn't tell anyone. But I knew exactly what would happen if I landed them as a client. It wouldn't just be an opportunity. It would be proof. Proof that I wasn't just the guy behind the camera. I was the one shaping the whole picture. And Ava had spent years pretending I was just available, while I'd quietly become valuable. The night before her launch event, I saw her post a countdown on Instagram. Can't wait to show you all what I've been working on. Big reveal tomorrow at 3 p.m. Party popper. She still hadn't realized the domain was gone. She was walking straight into it. And I wasn't going to stop her. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's standing tall while the person who ignored you stumbles over their own ego and realizing they need you. But this time, you've already walked away. The morning of Ava's big launch felt calm. I woke up to the sound of city traffic, made myself a strong coffee, and sat at my desk while the sun filtered through the blinds. The usual anxiety that used to come with anything involving my family was gone. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. I opened my site, leonardgray.co, and gave the front page a final polish. Then I checked the other site, avaandmichael.com. Still mine. Still live. Still displaying the quiet, professional message. This site has been retired by the original designer. Please contact leonardgray.co for design inquiries. No drama. No insults. Just a redirect to the truth. At 11 a.m., I had my call with the Modern Mom Network. They loved me. The founder, Kara, had seen my portfolio through a cousin who worked in branding. She told me she was looking for someone who could combine softness with structure. Someone who could give their brand a glow up without making it look like an Etsy baby shower page. We talked about strategy, design theory, color psychology, user funnels, and typography. She got excited when I mentioned UX testing. By the end of the call, she said, "We want to bring you on for our next 3 brand campaigns. Can I send you an NDA today?" I nodded, smiled, and said, "Absolutely." I signed the NDA 2 hours before Ava's launch event. Becca had been texting me updates all morning. Apparently, Ava had gone all in. She rented out a lounge cafe in the suburbs, complete with a mimosa bar, branded goodie bags, a little display table for her blog prints, and even a mini interview booth for Instagram Live. She thinks today's her big break, Becca wrote. She printed out QR codes to the site and put them on everything. Everything. I could barely keep from smiling. At 2:50 p.m., I sat down at my desk, refreshed the analytics page for the domain, and waited. 3 p.m., the numbers started climbing. 10 visitors. 30. 56. Then it shot past 100. They were all scanning her QR codes, clicking her links, typing in the address, clicking, and landing on my message. I imagined them standing in that perfectly curated lounge, scanning their little cards and whispering, "Wait, this isn't the site. Where's the blog? What does retired by the original designer mean?" And Ava, standing there in her beige jumpsuit, holding a flute of champagne with a shaky smile, slowly realizing that none of the links worked, that nothing she printed mattered, that everything she was promoting was already gone. At 3:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Ava, what did you do? Are you serious right now? I'm at my launch. People are asking what's going on. Fix this. Right now." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't owe her anything anymore. A minute later, another message. "Leo, I'm serious. I have potential sponsors here. You're ruining everything." Ruining? No. She had ruined it the moment she decided my time, my work, and my name were disposable. I refreshed the site. Over 300 visitors now. And then something strange happened. People stayed. Average time on site, 2 minutes, 54 seconds. They weren't bouncing. They were clicking through to my portfolio. And that's when the emails started. First, one from a parenting podcast asking about brand consulting. Then, a yoga studio. A mother-daughter travel blog. One woman wrote, "Hey, I saw your name on a blog launch page that seems to have not gone as planned, lol. But your portfolio is stunning. Are you open to small biz branding?" By the time Ava's launch party wrapped up in a cloud of confusion and frustration, I had booked 2 more consultations. At 6:30 p.m., I finally opened her latest message. "I swear to God, Leo, if you don't fix this, you're dead to me." I typed out a reply, deleted it, typed it again, deleted it again. Then I sent one sentence. "It was never yours to begin with." That was it. I closed the messages and moved on with my evening. At 9 p.m., Becca texted me one last time. She left the party early. She cried in the bathroom. Michael looked like he was about to explode. "Your mom said it was typical Leo, always needing to make a point." I didn't say anything. But a few of the cousins? They're on your side now. I read that twice and realized I didn't care what mom said anymore. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. I had built something of my own, without them, beyond them. A career, a name, a brand. Something they could neither dismiss nor take credit for. And Ava? She could still make her blog. She could still reprint her materials. She could even try to rebrand from scratch. But no matter what she did, the launch, the moment she wanted to prove herself to the world, would always be tied to mine. And everyone who saw her fall, saw me rise. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No angry texts. No voicemails. No group chat drama. Just the sound of my own breathing and the soft hum of my computer, still open from the night before. I stretched, made coffee, and sat down to check my inbox. 6 new client inquiries. One from a local organic skincare brand. Another from a digital magazine that had seen my site through, ironically, a link shared in a Reddit thread mocking Ava's failed blog launch. It had made the front page of a niche design community. When you try to launch a lifestyle brand using someone else's talent and forget who actually built your platform. Someone had screenshotted the domain message and shared it with the caption, "Imagine launching your blog only to advertise the person you underpaid and ignored." Poetic. The comments were brutal, but not from me. I hadn't said a word publicly. I didn't have to. By the afternoon, my mother finally called. I let it ring, then rang again, then a third time. On the 4th, I answered. "Leo," she said, voice tight, "we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair. I figured, "Your sister is devastated. She'll live." She sighed sharply, like she'd been holding it in. "You embarrassed her. In front of her friends. In front of her husband's colleagues. She said you sabotaged her, after everything we've done for you." I laughed. A small, bitter chuckle I didn't bother hiding. "Everything you've done for me? Or everything you expected from me?" There was a pause. "You were always so dramatic," she muttered. "Ava was just trying to build something. We all are. You could have been a part of it." "I was the whole thing," I said. "But none of you saw it." "Leo, I'm not coming to brunch next week. Or the week after that." Silence. "I'm not disappearing," I continued. "But I'm done being useful without being seen. I'm done being the background." She didn't argue. She just hung up. Ava didn't reach out again. Michael sent me one final email, short, clipped, angry. Something about brand damage and possible legal action. I responded with a copy of the domain receipt, a screenshot of the site agreement Ava had never finalized, and my invoice for unpaid design work. He never replied. 2 weeks later, I saw Ava had launched a new site, avamichael.blog. It looked fine, basic, a template from a free builder. The kind of site that came with placeholder text still lingering in the footer, proudly powered by Simple Sites. She posted about her new start, called it a minor technical glitch, and pushed through. But it never took off. The sponsors didn't call back. The giveaway fizzled. The comments were minimal. Her social media engagement tanked, probably because half the people following her were more interested in the drama than the content. Meanwhile, I hired a virtual assistant, booked a flight to Amsterdam to meet that design firm partner in person. And over the next 3 months, I doubled my income. I still didn't get invited to family dinners, but I didn't need to be. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found the original sketches I'd made for Ava's vow renewal invitations. Elegant curves, personalized details, a little monogram I had spent 3 days perfecting. I smiled, tore the page in half, and tossed it into the recycling bin. A week later, I mailed out my first set of business cards. Leonard Gray, visual identity architect. Clean. Sharp. No frills. On the back, in small lettering, was my new slogan. Don't forget who built the brand. That was the last time I ever gave anyone my work without knowing where it would lead. And the first time I realized, sometimes the best way to be seen is to stop hiding behind people who never looked at you in the first place. My name's Evan, I'm 29, and I've spent most of my life being the extra in my own family. Not quite invisible, just conveniently overlooked. You know the type, the kid who wasn't loud enough, funny enough, or flashy enough to compete with the real personalities in the room. Growing up, it was always my cousins who got the attention, the applause, the front row seats at family events. Me? I was the designated helper, the one tasked with taking group photos but never actually being in them. So when my cousin Emily announced her engagement and invited the entire family to a fancy dinner to celebrate, I honestly didn't expect much. I figured I'd be seated somewhere in the back, smile politely, clap at the speeches, and maybe even sneak out early if I could. But what actually happened? That was something else entirely. The dinner was at this upscale Italian place downtown. White tablecloths, chandeliers that looked like they cost more than my car, and servers who corrected your pronunciation of gnocchi with a smile. I showed up 15 minutes early because, well, punctuality is the one thing you can control when respect isn't on the menu. I wore my best blazer, freshly ironed shirt, and the watch I bought myself after landing my first promotion. I walked in expecting to see a few familiar faces, maybe get a nod from someone, but the moment I stepped into that private dining room, I knew I was out of place. My Aunt Karen, yes, her actual name, and yes, she lives up to it, was standing near the head of the table, sipping a drink and directing the seating arrangement like it was the royal wedding. Her eyes scanned the room like a security camera on a power trip. When she saw me, she gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Evan," she said, holding her wine glass in one hand and gesturing vaguely toward the back of the room with the other. "We weren't sure you'd show." "Of course," I said, trying to keep things cordial. "Wouldn't miss it." She didn't reply, just tilted her head and turned back to a cluster of relatives talking about how magical Emily's engagement shoot had been. I made my way around the long dining table, scanning for my name card. I saw rows of neatly printed place cards. Ashley, Tyler, Uncle Ron, Cousin Nate +1. But no Evan. After a few minutes of awkward pacing, I walked back toward the front to ask where I was supposed to sit. That's when Aunt Karen smirked, sipped her drink, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sorry, that seat's reserved for actual family." She nodded toward the far corner of the room, near the coat rack and the swinging door to the kitchen, where a single folding chair sat awkwardly next to a utility table covered in silverware trays and ice buckets. I felt my ears burn. A few people looked over, chuckled uncomfortably, then quickly looked away like they didn't want to get involved. I walked over in silence, my shoes echoing louder than they should have. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and stared at the centerpieces I could barely see from where I was placed. The smell of bleach and garlic hung in the air. The kitchen door swung open every few seconds, sending blasts of hot steam over my shoulder. I counted 7 separate trays of coats tossed onto the rack beside me. And for the next 20 minutes, not a single person spoke to me. I wish I could say this was the first time something like this happened. It wasn't. But it was the first time it felt so intentional, so performative, like they wanted me to feel small. Like my presence was a courtesy they regretted extending. I watched them laugh, toast, clink their glasses, and take photos I was clearly excluded from. The server brought out appetizers and a pesto platters, little toast with fig jam, arancini, so perfect they could have been in a magazine. None of it came my way. I got a small breadbasket that was clearly left over from another table. The butter was still frozen solid. I checked my phone a few times, half hoping someone might have texted me to say they noticed what was happening. Nothing. No messages. No missed calls. Just a low battery, warning, and a blurry front-facing camera shot of me looking like I'd wandered into the wrong event. Eventually, dinner was served. The room filled with the clatter of plates and silverware, and still no one glanced my way. Even the servers hesitated when they passed me, like I wasn't officially part of the party. And then came the moment that snapped everything into sharp focus. The final course, some overpriced dessert involving tiramisu and edible gold flakes, had just been cleared when a man in a blazer, likely the manager, walked in with a polished leather folder in hand. He looked around for a second, then made a beeline toward me. He stopped in front of my chair, opened the folder, and placed the check on the small metal table beside me. I glanced at it. $2,723. Gratuity included. I blinked. Looked up. Sorry, I said. I think you've got the wrong person. No, he said smoothly. I was told you'd be handling the bill. A woman with a silver necklace and blonde hair said it was already discussed. I didn't need to look across the room to know who that was. My Aunt Karen had stood up and was now watching me with the kind of smug satisfaction you'd expect from someone who just won a petty war they'd been planning for years. I looked around the table. Not a single person made eye contact. Not Emily. Not my uncle. Not even my own mother, who was seated toward the end and quietly dabbing her lips with a napkin like nothing had happened. I could feel my heart pounding, but it wasn't from panic. It was something colder, sharper. Like all the times I'd been stepped on or overlooked had suddenly coagulated into this one crystal clear moment of clarity. I took a deep breath, stood up slowly, reached for my jacket, and pulled it over my shoulders. Then I smiled. Not a fake smile. Not a keep the peace smile. Just a simple, calm, I finally see you for what you were smile. I looked the manager in the eye and said, good luck. Then turned on my heel and walked straight out of the room. And just as the door swung shut behind me, leaving the stunned silence of that private dining room behind, I heard the first voice break the tension with a frantic, wait, what? The cold air outside hit my face like a slap, and honestly, it felt refreshing. I didn't look back. Not once. I just kept walking down the marble steps, past the valet who barely glanced at me, and out into the parking lot. My car was parked a block away. Standard family protocol. Always leave the good spots for the important guests. But that walk? That was the lightest my feet had ever felt. Inside, though, I was on fire. Not with rage. I wasn't boiling or storming out in a huff. It was something much more dangerous than that. I was calm, clear-headed, and done. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt a kind of power I didn't even know I had. The power to leave. I sat in my car for a while, just staring at the steering wheel, processing it all. My phone buzzed. One message. From Emily. Hey, where'd you go? I didn't respond. A second later, another message popped in. I think there's been a mix-up about the bill. Can you come back? Now that made me laugh. A mix-up? Right. Like it wasn't a setup from the start. Like I didn't see Aunt Karen whisper something to the manager 5 minutes before the check arrived. Like I hadn't been treated like luggage at a family reunion. A third message came in, this one from my mother. Evan, come back. Don't make a scene. Ah, the classic. Don't make a scene. As if I had been the one turning the family tree into a dumpster fire. As if I had chosen to treat someone like they were barely worth the chair they sat on. And just like that, I realized I wasn't angry at the silence from my relatives. I was angry at myself for putting up with it for this long. For excusing it. For calling it just how things are. I started the engine. The next day, the messages kept rolling in. First, it was the passive-aggressive ones. We all chipped in and covered the bill since someone bailed. You could have said something instead of walking out like that. This is why people treat you like this, Evan. You're always so sensitive. Then came the guilt-tripping. You embarrassed Emily on her special night. Your aunt was just joking. Can't you take a joke? We were trying to include you. You just don't really fit in with the vibe. The vibe. That word stuck with me like a splinter. That's what I was to them. An aesthetic mismatch. Not family. Not one of us. Just the quiet, awkward cousin who they trotted out when they needed a tech favor or help moving furniture, but who wasn't welcome in their glossy, filtered, Instagram-ready version of what family should look like. But they had a point. I didn't fit in. I didn't laugh at the mean jokes. I didn't fake smile through disrespect. I didn't pretend it was okay when people said things like, you'll never understand, you don't have a real career, or, well, at least Tyler makes something of himself. Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe I was too forgiving. But I wasn't too stupid. Not anymore. The real tipping point came 2 days later. I was sitting in my apartment, working late on a project for a client. Because, yes, I do have a real career, even if it doesn't come with a nameplate or a corner office, when my phone buzzed with a call from my Uncle Ron. I stared at the screen. He never called me. Not unless his computer crashed or he needed help recovering a password. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, another call. This time from Aunt Karen. Decline. Then another. Then another. Curiosity got the better of me, so I finally answered the next call. Emily. Evan, she breathed, clearly stressed. Can you please talk to the venue? They won't let us finish the deposit without confirmation from the cardholder. I blinked. What cardholder? She hesitated. Well, Aunt Karen put the reservation under your name when she made the group booking. She said it was easier because you had that freelancer card or whatever. I sat back in my chair, silent, processing. You're telling me she used my name and card to book a venue without telling me and expected me to just show up and pay? It wasn't like that, Emily said quickly. She said you'd agreed, that you wanted to do something nice for me. I rubbed my temple. Emily, I've been ignored, insulted, shoved to the back of the room, and stuck with a $2,700 check. And now I find out that legally, I'm the one on the hook for your entire engagement dinner. She said she'd transfer you the money afterward, she snapped. You're being so dramatic. Right, I said flatly. Because nothing screams respect like putting someone on the financial line without consent. There was a pause on the line. Then Emily said something that made every muscle in my jaw tighten. Well, if you weren't so touchy, maybe people would actually treat you better. Click. I hung up. No rage. No yelling. Just a quiet, icy certainty. This wasn't just family dysfunction. This was calculated disrespect wrapped in fake smiles and wine glasses. And it was time I stopped being their silent punching bag. That night, I went through every single automatic payment I'd been helping with over the years. My mom's cell phone plan, gone. My uncle's Netflix account, logged out. The Disney Plus subscription that all the cousins had been using under my name, canceled. I checked my old Venmo records and realized I'd covered dozens of Uber rides, dinners, and birthday gifts that no one had ever reimbursed me for. Fine, let them start remembering the cost of things. But the real move? That came with the venue. Because, see, I hadn't given them a card. Aunt Karen had given them my name, assuming they could pressure me into covering it. But I called the venue directly, explained the situation, and they confirmed what I suspected. No payment had been processed yet. Just a placeholder authorization. All I had to do was say the word, and the entire thing would be dropped. So I did. And 20 minutes later, the manager sent me a polite confirmation email, saying the reservation was canceled due to lack of payment authorization, and that any future bookings would require upfront deposits from a verified cardholder. The group chat that had been silent for hours suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. At first, it was confusion. Aunt Karen texted, "Did the venue cancel? Why? I'm on hold with them now, and they're saying the booking's voided." Emily texted, "What is going on? That place was supposed to be for the bridal shower. Do you know how long it took me to get that reservation?" Then came the shift. Confusion gave way to blame. Tyler, my cousin, the self-appointed family leader, texted, "Evan, seriously? Are you trying to sabotage your own cousin's wedding now?" Mom texted, "Can we all just calm down?" Maybe Evan had a reason. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding." Aunt Karen texted, "Oh, please. He's been sulking since the dinner. This is revenge, plain and simple." I didn't say a word. I let them spiral. It was oddly cathartic watching them unravel without my input for once. But the real fun didn't start until Aunt Karen called me directly. No text. No voicemail. Just a FaceTime call at 11:42 p.m. I stared at the screen as her name flashed, then let it ring out. A few seconds later, she tried again. And again. And again. On the fifth try, I picked up. Her face was red. Not angry red. Panicked red. She was pacing in what looked like her kitchen, one hand holding the phone at an unflattering angle, the other clenched in a fist by her side. "You're being childish," she snapped before I could even say hello. I tilted my head. "Good evening to you too. I'm serious, Evan. This stunt with the venue? You've put us all in a very difficult position. You put yourselves there," I said calmly. "You used my name without my permission. You assumed I'd just pay for it like I always do. Why would you think that was okay?" She scoffed. "Because that's what family does. You're not married. You don't have kids. You're doing fine financially. What's a few $1,000s for you?" I laughed, dry and bitter. "You know, that might be the most honest thing you've said to me in years. What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "you don't see me as family. You see me as an ATM that occasionally shows up in person. And now that I finally said no, you're scrambling because you don't know how to deal with someone who has boundaries." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she hissed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You're not smarter, Evan. You're just mad you didn't get to play victim this time." "Victim?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You sat me by a coat rack and gave my seat to Tyler's +1, then stuck me with the bill and expected me to be grateful. And now you're mad I finally decided not to fund your fantasy of being the hostess with the mostest." You really think I'm the one with the problem? Her eyes narrowed. Emily's crying. You ruined her week. And you know what? I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. I think, I said, smiling coolly, they already do. That's the problem, isn't it? Then I ended the call. I went to bed feeling lighter than I had in years. The fallout came fast. By morning, I'd been removed from the group chat entirely. Not even a goodbye, just gone. I wasn't surprised. That chat had mostly been a way for everyone to show off their kids' birthdays and humble brag about vacations anyway. No real communication ever happened there. Just filtered perfection and the occasional, Evan, can you Venmo for this? But I didn't stay in the dark for long. My cousin Ashley, who'd always been a little less plastic than the rest, texted me privately. Hey, I saw what happened. That was insane. I just want you to know I would have walked out too. I stared at the message for a long time. Then another came in. Karen's telling everyone you went nuclear because you weren't the center of attention. Just so you know, no one's buying it. And another. Also random, but I think you're about to get an invoice. She's trying to stick you with some cancellation fees. Can they even do that? I didn't reply. Not yet. I had something better in mind. I dug out the email I'd received from the venue manager. It included a digital trail, the original booking email from Karen's address, using my name but her contact info. It was all the evidence I needed. I forwarded it, along with a short explanation, to my bank's fraud protection team. If she tried to push an invoice my way, she'd have to explain why she used my identity to make the booking in the first place. But I wasn't done yet. I remembered something else, something small, but satisfying. That group dinner? It had been tagged all over Facebook and Instagram. I opened one of the posts. A photo of everyone smiling at the table, glasses raised, gold lighting glowing off their hair. In the caption, family means everything, #blessed, #Emily and Ben. I clicked the report button. Tag includes misrepresented identity or impersonation. Event attendee falsely named in photo. Content includes harassment or exclusion. Petty? Maybe. But so was seating someone next to a coat rack and expecting them to pay for your golden tiramisu. As I sat back, sipping my coffee, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about refusing to be complicit anymore. About finally standing up, not to scream or fight, but to simply walk away. But of course, they weren't going to let me go that easily. That afternoon, I got a knock at my door. It was Uncle Ron, and he wasn't smiling. I stood there for a second, just staring at the door. I hadn't seen Uncle Ron in person for what? Over a year? The last time was at my cousin Nate's baby shower, where Ron had made a joke about how some people contribute grandkids, and some people just contribute cash. He said it with a laugh, but I remember how his eyes never once left mine. Now he was standing on my doorstep, looking tired, like someone had dragged him into something he didn't want to be part of. He wore a windbreaker over a button-down shirt, like he couldn't decide if he was going for a confrontation or a casual Sunday visit. I opened the door halfway. Ron, I said, not moving to invite him in. Evan, he replied, shifting from one foot to the other. You got a minute? Not really, I said, folding my arms. He exhaled through his nose. Look, I'm not here to fight. Karen's, well, you know how she gets. I raised an eyebrow. No, Ron, why don't you enlighten me? He winced slightly. All right, fair enough. I thought maybe I could talk to you. You know, smooth things over. I leaned against the doorframe. Smooth what over? The part where your wife used my name without my consent? Or the part where she humiliated me in front of the whole family and expected me to foot the bill? Ron scratched the back of his neck. She thought you wouldn't mind. I laughed, short, sharp. That's not an excuse. That's an assumption built on years of you all treating me like a doormat. Evan, he said, his voice softening. You've always been the calm one. The one who didn't stir the pot. That's why Karen thought you'd understand. She didn't mean to hurt you. Tell me, I said, stepping forward slightly. When's the last time you, or anyone, actually checked if I was okay with how I've been treated? When's the last time someone in the family reached out just to see how I was doing, without needing a favor, or money, or tech help? He didn't answer. Exactly, I said. He sighed and looked at the floor. You're right. The admission caught me off guard. I told her she crossed a line, he said. She won't admit it, not to you, but she knows. And Emily, she's heartbroken. Thinks you hate her now. I crossed my arms tighter. I don't hate Emily. But she stood by and let it happen. That's almost worse. I know, he nodded. Look, I'm not here to convince you to come back into the fold. I get it. But Karen's been talking about hiring a lawyer, trying to say you canceled the reservation maliciously, that you owe her for lost deposits. My jaw tightened. She's bluffing. Maybe, Ron said. But she's also stubborn and vindictive. I figured you should know. I looked him in the eye. If she tries to take it legal, I've already got documentation. Emails, timestamps, call logs. She impersonated me on an official booking. Any decent lawyer would laugh her out of the room. He nodded slowly. Then I guess you're ready. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We stood in silence for a few seconds. All right, Ron said finally. I'll tell her you're not backing down. I gave a single nod. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Evan, you were always the one I respected most. And then he left. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt heavy, but clean. In the following days, Karen tried. Oh, she tried. She sent one of those per my last email messages that looked like it had been drafted by a corporate HR bot. She claimed damages, emotional distress, and the loss of important family memories. She CC'd Emily. She hinted that someone might be compelled to seek reimbursement if I didn't resolve the situation promptly. I forwarded the entire chain to my lawyer friend, Caleb, who owed me a favor after I helped him recover a corrupted hard drive last year. He wrote back in all caps, "Do not worry about this." Karen never sent another email. The family kept their distance. I didn't get invited to Emily's bridal shower. I didn't get a save the date for the wedding. I didn't even get a happy birthday text that year. But you know what? I was okay. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just in the family. I was free from it. The version of family that had existed in that orbit, it wasn't about love or connection. It was about image, control, favor trading, and silent resentment, and don't make a scene. Once I stopped participating, it all lost power. A few months later, I threw a dinner party. Nothing big, just 6 friends who had become more like family than my actual blood. I cooked lasagna from scratch, made garlic knots, poured wine, and we sat around a table laughing so loudly the neighbors knocked once just to tell us they could hear our vibes from the hallway. After dessert, someone raised a glass and toasted me. To Evan, they said, for finally choosing peace. And as I looked around the table, I realized they were right. Peace didn't come from forcing a seat at someone else's table. It came from building your own. That same night, I posted something simple on social media. Just one photo of our table, all smiles and candles and crumbs from second helpings. The caption read, "Sometimes, family isn't who shares your name. It's who shares your laughter." A week later, Ashley liked the post. Then she messaged me again. "You were right. I'm sorry for not saying more before. Mind if I come by next time?" I smiled and typed, "Of course. Just bring dessert." And that was that. No dramatic reunions. No epic apologies. Just a new chapter, written on my own terms. I didn't need to burn the bridge. I just needed to stop walking back across it. My name's Mark. I'm 31, a software developer by trade, and apparently the invisible child in my own family. Or, as I've been not so jokingly referred to since I was a teenager, the backup plan. I used to think they were just being playful, that the favoritism I noticed growing up was harmless. My younger brother, Jason, was always the center of attention, captain of the football team, loud, charming, the kind of guy who could lie through his teeth and still get a standing ovation. I was quieter, preferred books over parties, and somehow that translated to less memorable in my mother's eyes. My dad left when I was 11, so it was just us and our mom. And maybe that's when it really started, the imbalance, the weird dynamic. Jason acted out, and I stepped up. I helped around the house, did well in school, got a part-time job when I was 16 to help with groceries. But in every photo album, every Facebook post, every holiday toast, it was always Jason this, Jason that. If I ever said anything, it was "stop being jealous," or "you know how your brother is." That phrase. I swear, if I had $1 for every time I heard, "you know how your brother is," I'd have retired by now. By the time I turned 25, I'd already moved out, graduated college with 0 debt thanks to scholarships and 2 part-time jobs, and landed my first real position in the tech world. Jason, meanwhile, had dropped out of college, crashed 2 cars that weren't his, and was currently between projects, which is family speak for doing absolutely nothing. And yet somehow, when we'd come home for Thanksgiving or Christmas, Jason was the one who got the welcome banner. I was the one who picked up groceries, cooked half the meal, and still ended up sleeping on the couch while Jason took the guest room. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was just how families worked. That maybe Jason needed the attention more. That maybe I didn't need validation from people who clearly didn't know what to do with someone like me. But it wore on me quietly, like erosion. 1,000 tiny moments that chip away at your self-worth. You don't even realize you're angry until one day you're shaking with it. Last year was the first time I didn't go home for Christmas. I told them I had a deadline, that I couldn't make it. In truth, I just couldn't stomach another round of pretending I didn't notice when my own mother handed Jason a $5,000 check to help him get on his feet and gave me a pair of socks, literally socks. She laughed and said, "You always lose yours, don't you?" Jason winked at me across the table. "Don't be mad, bro. I'm the favorite, remember?" I left before dessert. I told myself I was done expecting anything from them. But apparently, some small piece of me wasn't. Some small part of me still thought maybe one day they'd see me. Actually see me. Spoiler, they didn't. My 31st birthday was coming up, and for the first time in years, I planned a dinner. I booked a private room at a nice Italian place in town, not over-the-top fancy, but definitely not cheap. I sent out the invites a month in advance. Just immediate family, Mom, Jason, our Aunt Liz, and my cousin Emily. 5 people. Small, simple. I made the reservations, prepaid the deposit, even ordered a custom cake with my name on it. I figured, if nothing else, I could at least give myself a birthday where I wasn't an afterthought. The night arrived. I got there early, dressed in a new shirt, even got a haircut. I don't usually do much for myself, but this felt different. Like maybe, just maybe, something had shifted. Maybe they'd show up and actually be present. Maybe they'd remember it was my day. They all showed up. Late, of course, but I let it slide. Jason walked in first, flashy as ever, wearing some designer jacket I'm fairly certain Mom paid for. He clapped me on the back and said, "Happy big day, bro." 31. Huh? That's like almost middle-aged. He laughed at his own joke and slid into the seat at the head of the table. My seat. I didn't say anything. I just took the one next to him. Mom came in right behind him, all smiles, clutching a gift bag that looked like it had been thrown together last minute from the pharmacy down the street. She kissed my cheek distractedly, then immediately turned to Jason. "Oh, honey, I saw that reel you posted. Hilarious." They started talking about some TikTok he made where he pretended to be a stay-at-home entrepreneur, whatever that means. Aunt Liz and Emily followed, both looking mildly disinterested, but polite enough to smile and say happy birthday. We ordered appetizers. I picked at the bruschetta while Jason loudly explained why he was taking a break from the traditional job market to focus on building passive income streams. Translation: he was still living off Mom's money. Mom beamed the entire time like he was announcing he'd just won the Nobel Prize. Then came the moment. The waiter brought out the cake, chocolate hazelnut, my favorite, and everyone did the usual awkward round of happy birthday. I was just about to blow out the candle when Mom raised her wine glass and said the words that froze the entire room. "To the son who actually matters." The air went still. I didn't even blink. Jason smirked. Aunt Liz laughed, not like it was funny, but more like she didn't know what else to do. Emily looked uncomfortable and mumbled something into her glass. I just stared at Mom. She clinked glasses with Jason, who grinned like he'd just won something. "To Jason," she said again, "always chasing his dreams." My hands didn't shake. My smile didn't falter. I just reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. A plain white one. No writing on the outside. I slid it across the table toward Mom, who looked confused for a second but took it anyway. She opened it while Jason watched with mild amusement. It took 5 seconds. Her eyes scanned the paper. Then her face dropped, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Her wine glass tipped sideways, hit the table, and shattered. Red soaked into the tablecloth. No one moved. No one said a word. The paper in that envelope wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even long, just a single page. But every word on it had weight. Legal weight. You see, what Mom and Jason didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that 6 months earlier, I bought the house. Their house. The one Mom had lived in since she inherited it from her parents. The one Jason still called home whenever he dropped by to raid the fridge, crash for a few weeks, and leave laundry everywhere like he was still 17. The family home had gone into foreclosure quietly. Turns out, when you spend most of your time enabling your favorite child and writing checks you can't cash, the bank notices. Mom never told anyone, of course, not Jason, not Liz, not even me. But I caught wind of it by accident. I was visiting my old high school, meeting with a former teacher who now ran a coding program. He mentioned how sad it was that the house on Maple Drive was being repossessed, said it was a shame what happened to the Mitchells. The Mitchells? My family. I could have asked Mom about it. I could have brought it up. But I didn't. I went straight to the bank, made some calls, and arranged to buy it outright. Cash. My tech job had done well, 2 promotions, a big raise, and a side project that got acquired. I had the money. And just like that, the house was mine. I paid off the liens, renovated the roof, updated the plumbing. All while she kept living there, clueless. It wasn't hard. She'd grown so used to depending on me in quiet ways, asking me to spot the utility bill, cover Jason's overdue insurance, help out with random repairs. So when I started sending payments through a fake LLC I'd set up, she didn't question it. And that envelope was the transfer of ownership. The title deed. Signed, notarized, and stamped. With one final clause highlighted in bold, tenant has 60 days to vacate the premises. The silence at the table was suffocating. Jason finally leaned over, trying to read the paper upside down. "What is that?" he asked, still smirking like this was some kind of prank. "Is this a joke?" Mom looked up at me, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, but no words coming out. "It's not a joke," I said calmly, dabbing a bit of wine off my sleeve. "I own the house. Have for 6 months. You're living there under my name." Liz gasped. Emily blinked rapidly. Jason laughed, a quick, awkward noise that died in his throat. "But that's our home," Mom finally croaked. "That's my home." "It was," I replied. "Until you let it go. I saved it. Quietly. Respectfully. And I let you stay, rent-free, for half a year while you toasted the son who actually matters." Jason slammed his hand on the table. "You can't do this." I tilted my head. "Jason, you've never paid rent. You haven't held a job in years. You've coasted on Mom's money, and when that ran out, on mine. You walk around like you're the second coming of Elon Musk because you made a TikTok that got 20K views. Meanwhile, I've been paying for everything from your health insurance to the gas in Mom's car." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You want to talk about who matters?" I said, locking eyes with my mother. "It's not about money. It's about respect. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to celebrate me. But what you don't get to do, not anymore, is treat me like the family ATM and the family disappointment in the same breath." The room was dead quiet. Even the waiter, who had returned to check on the broken glass, froze halfway through the door before silently backing out again. I turned to Emily, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the chair. "You've always been kind to me," I said gently. "And Aunt Liz, you never played favorites. I appreciate that." Then I looked back at Mom. She was trembling, holding the paper like it was a bomb. "You have 60 days, I repeated softly. "Use them wisely." Jason stood up like he was about to start yelling, but I stood too calmly, with my coat already draped over one arm. "And just so there's no confusion," I added, looking him dead in the eye, "this isn't revenge. This is clarity. The kind you all refused to give me, so I found it myself." I left the room to the sound of chairs scraping and whispers. I didn't look back. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time. Not crying, not smiling, just breathing. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because I'd hurt them, that had never been the goal, but because I'd finally said what needed to be said. I'd finally acted, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Of course, that was only the beginning. 2 days later, Jason showed up at my apartment. Not to apologize, oh no. He came with a plan. One that would test everything I'd just done and show me exactly how far they were willing to go to hold on to their fantasy. He rang the buzzer 5 times in a row, like some overgrown teenager who still thought he could get attention by being obnoxious. I didn't answer at first. I just stood there by the door, listening. Then I saw through the peephole Jason, pacing in front of my building with his phone in one hand and what looked like a coffee in the other, muttering to himself. I sighed. I opened the door before he could buzz again. He turned to me with that smug, entitled grin that used to make me second-guess myself. "Not anymore." "Bro," he said, drawing it out like a peace offering. "You gotta be kidding with that paperwork. 60 days? Really? I thought you were just making a point." I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. "It wasn't a point. It's a boundary. Something you've never learned to respect." He laughed, actually laughed. "Man, come on. This is Mom's house. You're gonna kick her out? Over what? Some passive-aggressive toast at your birthday?" I crossed my arms. "You really think that's what this is about?" He shrugged. sipping his coffee. Look, I get it. You've always had this chip on your shoulder. You're the responsible one. I'm the favorite. Whatever. But at the end of the day, it's family, dude. You don't just evict your mother. Family doesn't treat someone like a convenience store. I shot back. She raised her glass to you at my birthday. Do you even hear how twisted that is? I've been covering her bills, your bills, cleaning up the messes you two leave behind without ever asking for anything. And not once, has either of you acknowledged it. He smirked again. So this is revenge then? No, I said quietly. This is me finally choosing myself. Jason's smirk faltered. Just a flicker. Then he leaned in, his tone lowering. She's freaking out, man. Like, panic mode. Crying, making calls to Uncle Ray, even talking about suing you. She won't win, I said flatly. The paperwork's airtight. He scowled. You really think you're better than us now? That your fancy job, your little apartment, your savings account. You think money makes you right? No, I replied, stepping back toward the door. But it sure helps pay the bills you two keep ignoring. That's when his facade cracked. His voice rose just a bit, his tone sharpening. If you go through with this, don't expect to be part of this family anymore. I looked him dead in the eye. You made sure I never really was. And with that, I went back inside. No door slam, no dramatic exit. Just quiet. Over the next week, things escalated. First, it started with Mom's texts, long, guilt-laced paragraphs that read like monologues from a low-budget soap opera. How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone? I carried you for 9 months, and this is how you repay me? I never thought you'd become so cold. She didn't mention the toast. She didn't mention the bills I'd covered or the fact that she'd let Jason leech off her for the last decade. Just pure victimhood. I didn't respond. Then came the flying monkeys. Aunt Liz texted saying she was disappointed in how I handled things. Cousin Emily unfollowed me on Instagram. Jason left me a voicemail calling me vindictive and bitter. All of them seemed to forget that I had spent years quietly keeping the family from collapsing in on itself while they praised Jason for learning how to plug in a router. But the final straw wasn't the messages or the silent treatment. It was the call I got from the bank. Apparently, someone had tried to request a freeze on the property, citing family estate confusion. When I pressed the banker, she said someone claiming to be a legal heir had insisted there was a dispute in ownership and that the sale wasn't legitimate. Jason. It had to be him. I hung up, furious. Not surprised, just furious. I'd given them 6 months of free living. I'd kept my name out of it. I could have sold the house right away, flipped it for profit, or moved in myself. But I gave them time, grace, silence. And this is how they repaid me? With lies? With manipulation? With attempts to steal back something I legally owned? That was the moment something inside me hardened. They thought this was over a toast. They thought this was a petty act of revenge from the forgotten son. What they didn't understand, and never cared to understand, was that this wasn't just about a house. It was about every Christmas I spent watching Jason open the biggest gifts while I got a clearance hoodie from Walmart. It was about every time I fixed something quietly, a leaky pipe, an overdue bill, and got a well, that's what sons are for in return. It was about being good, being dependable, being the one who held the line while Jason was free to crash and burn. And now that I'd taken control, they wanted to burn me for it. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I didn't respond to the bank call immediately. I took a day, one full day to think. I spent it walking through the city with my phone on silent, watching strangers with coffee cups and backpacks and easy smiles. It reminded me how small the bubble I grew up in really was. That house, that family, that hierarchy where Jason was the golden boy and I was the background character, it wasn't the world. It was a bad habit I'd never broken. But now, I had the chance to rewrite the ending. When I got home, I called my lawyer. Not a family lawyer, my lawyer. Her name's Claire. Smart, efficient, and with zero patience for games. I'd hired her originally to make sure the purchase of the house was clean. Now I needed her to make it clear to everyone else. I need a formal cease and desist sent to my brother, I said over the phone. And I want you to draft a notice of eviction, not just for my mom, but for him, too. He's not on the lease. He's not on anything. He's a squatter at this point. Claire didn't even flinch. Consider it done. I'll have the letters out by noon. Also, I added, let's put the house on the market. I want it listed before the end of the month. There was a short silence. Are you sure? She asked. That's a big move. I've never been more sure. The next week was pure chaos, but controlled chaos, the kind I orchestrated from a distance. The cease and desist arrived first, addressed to Jason. Claire made it airtight. It referenced his attempt to interfere with the bank, cited potential fraud, and warned of legal action if he so much as called the loan officer again. She CC'd the bank. He tried calling me twice. I didn't pick up. Then came the formal eviction notice. This one hit Mom hard. She called me sobbing, the kind of performative sobbing I used to fall for when I was 10 and thought family first meant something. I didn't pick up. She left voicemails, some pitiful, some angry, some switching between the two in the same breath. After everything I've done for you? You're going to sell the house your grandparents built? You're going to kick your own mother out on the street? I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I forwarded one of the messages to Claire, who filed it away in case she tries anything legally. She warned me that Mom might attempt to stall or claim hardship. Don't worry, I told her. She'll stall. It's all she knows how to do. Jason, meanwhile, posted about me on social media. No names, of course. Just vague jabs like, nothing like getting stabbed in the back by your own brother, and family doesn't mean anything when greed's involved. He even tagged some inspirational quote accounts, as if that would give him moral high ground. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered every time he laughed at me for being boring. Every time he mocked my job, my clothes, my silence. Every time he got bailed out, covered, rescued, and looked smug doing it. I didn't need revenge. I just needed freedom. The house hit the market 2 weeks later. My realtor called it a charming 3-bedroom with historical character and new renovations. We had 3 offers within the first 4 days. I picked the one with a clean cash offer and a fast close. Then I sent the final notice, 30 days to vacate. Jason showed up one last time at my office, of all places. He waited by the front entrance until I stepped out for lunch. I wasn't even surprised to see him anymore. You're really doing it, he said. No smile this time. Just bitter resentment. You're actually going to sell the house. Our family's house. No, I replied, adjusting my coat. My house. You're welcome, by the way. You would have lost it years ago. He shook his head slowly. You think you're the hero in all this? No, I said. I think I'm the only adult in a family full of children. He clenched his jaw. You're dead to her, you know. To Mom. I looked him in the eye. I was dead to her the second I was born second. He didn't have a response to that. Just walked away, shoulders tense, ego bruised, pride deflated. He never contacted me again after that. The day Mom moved out, I wasn't there. Claire handled it. She coordinated with a property manager and ensured the locks were changed after they left. I heard they tried to stall again, something about her back pain and Jason's pending business opportunity in the garage, but it didn't matter. The sale had gone through. The new owners were moving in the next day. I asked the property manager to leave a manila envelope on the counter for them. Inside was a short note that read, "Take good care of this place." She taught me how to survive, but not how to live. Maybe now it can be a home again. As for me, I used the sale money to put a down payment on a quiet condo on the other side of the city. It's not huge, but it's mine. No one else's name on the deed. No one dropping by unannounced. No guilt, no manipulation, no pretending. I took a solo trip for my next birthday. Booked a cabin in the mountains with good Wi-Fi, a stocked fridge, and silence. The kind of silence that feels earned. No texts from family. No missed calls. No fake toasts or awkward dinners. Just me, a fire pit, a bottle of red wine, and peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the responsible one. I wasn't the backup. I wasn't the disappointment. I was the man who walked away from a rigged system and built something of his own, quietly, confidently, and without apology. And that, to me, was the real birthday gift. My name's Elias. I'm 32, and if you ever want to test how much resentment a person can carry and still smile through it, try being the regret your mother toasts to at her retirement party. It happened last Friday. My mother, Denise, was finally retiring after nearly 4 decades in the school district. Elementary vice principal turned local legend, as the paper once called her. Everyone was there. Former colleagues, students, family, neighbors, and of course, my older brother, Grant, the golden boy. He was the star athlete turned financial advisor with a wife, 2 kids, a golden retriever, and apparently my mother's undivided pride. Growing up, Grant was always the responsible one, the leader, while I was the kid who got too quiet in crowds, the one who asked questions at dinner that made people shift uncomfortably. I was the one who didn't follow the script. No sports, no big career moves, no settling down in the suburbs. I worked in digital media, remote, freelancing mostly. I traveled, sometimes too much. To them, I was the weird one. The mistake. The event was held at a local golf club ballroom, complete with a buffet, string quartet, and a slideshow that played softly in the background. Pictures of her with students, teachers, PTA meetings, Christmas parties, and award nights. Grant and I were featured in some photos too, mostly from when we were kids. But every time my face appeared, the slide seemed to change just a little faster. I knew the tone of the night the moment I walked in. My mom greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and said, "You clean up nice, Elias." For once. Then she turned to greet the mayor. Grant gave me a handshake and an overly rehearsed, "Glad you made it, little bro." Like I hadn't flown in from Barcelona just to be there. The speeches started halfway through dinner. Her old colleagues said kind things. Some funny stories. Light applause. Then Grant took the mic. "It's rare that a mother can do so much for so many," he began, "and still find the time to raise two incredible sons. Well, one, anyway." The room burst into polite laughter. He looked over at me like it was all in good fun. I sipped my water. When Mom finally took the stage, her hair perfectly pinned, her floral blazer matching the napkins, she smiled warmly at the crowd. "I've spent my life trying to make a difference," she said, "to shape young lives. And I'm proud to say I raised two amazing children." She paused. Her lips curled into that knowing smirk I hated as a kid. "And one regret." The audience roared. Grant laughed the loudest, nearly clapping. "At least she's finally saying it out loud," he called out. And I just smiled. Because I came prepared. See, this wasn't my first humiliation. This wasn't even the 10th. Every family holiday had become a quiet exercise in being tolerated. Christmas? I got a re-gifted mug and a silent seat at the table. Last Thanksgiving, they forgot I was allergic to walnuts and put pecan pie at every place setting but mine. My birthday this year? A group text at 11 p.m. with one thumbs-up emoji from Grant. But this night was mine. I had brought a small gift bag, plain blue paper, nothing flashy, and left it under the podium before dinner. No one had noticed. I walked up slowly, took the mic from her hands as she beamed at me like I was still 6 and about to recite something stupid for attention. "Then you won't mind," I said into the mic, "if I share my gift first." The room quieted, more out of politeness than curiosity. I reached into the bag and pulled out a small remote. "I thought I'd contribute to the slideshow," I said casually, clicking once. The screen flickered. The photo of her holding a student's award disappeared, replaced by another, a scan of an email. From 5 years ago, my dad's name in the subject line, and a message beneath it. Short, cold, damning. "Denise, I can't keep doing this. You lied. You said he was mine. But the test was clear. Elias isn't." The room gasped. My father, or the man I had called my father for 32 years, dropped his fork. My mother's face drained completely. Grant stopped laughing. I clicked again. The next slide came up. A PDF of the paternity test. Dated. Signed. Certified. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just watched the expressions shift. Some confusion. Some horror. Some people whispering already. I could feel every pair of eyes crawling across me like ants. And I just stood there, still holding the mic, breathing in the silence like fresh air. Because this wasn't just about genetics. It was about the 32 years I spent chasing scraps of validation from a woman who resented my existence and a family who treated me like a punchline. This was just the beginning. But I paused there, letting it sink in, letting everyone, including the people who laughed minutes ago, see the full weight of what had just been dropped into the room. And my father? His hands were shaking. He looked at my mom with disbelief, anger, betrayal. And then he opened his mouth. But before he could say a word, I turned off the mic and clicked to the next slide. The next slide wasn't a document. It was a photo, an old one. Grainy, scanned from a physical print. A picture of my mom in her 20s, sitting on a beach towel with a man no one in that room had ever seen before. Not my dad, not anyone they'd know, but I knew who he was. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring in the picture. She was smiling too wide, hair windblown, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. And the man? He had his arm around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder like he belonged there. Like this wasn't just some summer fling. And dated in the corner, March 1991. 11 months before I was born. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just let the image sit there on the screen like an open wound. The crowd had fallen silent. Even the waitstaff stopped moving. Forks were midair. A single champagne flute tipped and clinked softly against the floor, but nobody looked away from the screen. My father, Steve, stood up so suddenly his chair toppled over behind him. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Finally, he spoke. "Who is that?" His voice was hoarse. My mother said nothing. She hadn't moved. Not an inch. Steve stepped forward, eyes locked on the photo like it was a ghost. "Denise." "Who is that man?" Still, she said nothing. So I answered. Calm. Clear. His name was Eric. He was a substitute teacher at her school for a semester. They kept in touch. She told him I was his. And then she told you I was yours. My father's head turned toward me like it physically hurt to hear. "How do you know all this?" I pulled a folded letter from my jacket. "He wrote this to her. Back in 2001. She kept it. It was in the attic. I found it last year when I was helping her move boxes." I handed it to him. He didn't reach for it at first. Then, slowly, like he didn't trust his own limbs, he took it, opened it, started to read. As he did, his expression changed. From confusion to pain. From pain to something else entirely. "You knew?" he asked, still looking at her. "You've known all this time, and you let me believe," his voice broke. "You let me raise him, pay for everything, sit through this." He gestured toward the party, the cake, the guests. "Steve, my mom finally tried to speak, but her voice cracked like glass. "You lied to me. For 32 years. His voice was louder now. "And you let our son, no, your son, grow up thinking he was the problem?" I glanced at Grant. He looked pale, like he was finally doing the math in real time, like everything he'd ever believed had just twisted sideways. He stood up. "Wait, what is this? Elias, what are you saying?" I turned to him. "I'm saying you spent your whole life lording over me like I was some burden, some stain on the family. But turns out I was never really part of it. Not the way you were. Not to her. I was just a reminder of something she tried to bury." Grant opened his mouth, then shut it again. No comeback this time. No punchline. Just silence. I took a step forward and looked out across the crowd. "You all toasted her for being this pillar of the community, this hero of education. But here's the truth. She built her image by erasing parts of her life she didn't want to acknowledge, starting with me." The room was dead quiet. Someone near the back, one of her teacher friends, stood up and quietly walked out. Then another. I clicked the remote again. This time, the screen went black. No more slides. Just me, holding the mic. "I didn't come here to ruin a party," I said softly. "I came here to end a lie." Then I set the microphone down on the podium, walked to my seat, and sat down. The tension didn't break. It stretched, thick and quiet and unbearable. Steve was still holding the letter, staring at the paper like it was an X-ray of everything he hadn't wanted to see. My mom still hadn't moved. And then, after what felt like an entire minute, she finally spoke. "You had no right," she said, her voice low and shaky. I turned to her. "No right. You stood up in front of everyone and said you raised 2 amazing children and 1 regret. You made this public. I just gave them the context." She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in my life, I saw something other than irritation or disappointment in her eyes. I saw fear, not of me, but of everything falling apart in real time. Her reputation, her marriage, her perfectly manicured legacy. "This isn't fair," she whispered, almost to herself. And that made me laugh. "Fair? You think any of this was fair?" But before I could say more, my dad dropped the letter, looked at both of us, and said something I'll never forget. "Get out." At first, I thought he meant me, but he didn't even glance my way. He was staring directly at her. The room was so quiet I could hear the slow hum of the air conditioning vents overhead, like background noise in a suspense movie just before something snaps. Steve's voice had cut through the air like a blade. "Get out." He said it again, louder this time. Not shouted, just sharp. Final. Denise's mouth opened like she was about to protest, but then she caught something in his eyes. Something cold. Something that told her this wasn't a fight she was going to win. Not here. Not in front of all these people. "Steve," she started, taking a cautious step toward him. "No," he said, backing away. "You lied to me for 3 decades. You let me believe. You let me believe he was my son." He gestured to me without looking, and I treated him like one, even when you didn't. A murmur rippled through the guests. A few more people gathered their things and started quietly slipping out, some out of discomfort, others maybe out of embarrassment for having clapped and laughed minutes earlier. She turned, slow, as if remembering the eyes on her now. And she forced a smile, the same tight, strained smile she used when a parent accused her of favoritism at school board meetings. Everyone, I think this has all just been. Don't, I said, standing again. Don't gaslight the room now. You don't get to spin this. You lied to Dad. You erased me from every family celebration in one way or another. And you were perfectly fine letting Grant treat me like a stray dog you let in the house out of pity. Grant flinched at that, but he didn't interrupt. Steve looked at me then, the first time since the slides. He wasn't angry, not at me, just broken, hollow. His face looked older than it had an hour ago. And you, he said to me slowly, when did you find out? I took a breath. Last year, just before Thanksgiving. I found the test and the letter in a storage box she asked me to move. I confronted her in private. She told me it didn't matter. Said, you're still lucky we raised you. Like I was some stray she adopted out of charity. He shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. And you didn't tell me? I looked down, then back at him. I didn't know how. I thought about it 100 times. I wanted to scream it some nights. But every time I came close, I'd just see how happy you were to still believe it. How much it would break you. His shoulders slumped. And then, quietly, he whispered, it still broke me. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. Across the room, Grant suddenly stood up straighter, like something had clicked in his brain. He pointed at me. You planned this. You waited until her retirement party to drop this bomb. You wanted to humiliate her. You wanted to ruin everything. I turned to him slowly. You mean, kind of like how she called me her regret in front of 100 people? While you laughed. That kind of humiliation. His jaw tightened. You think I ruined the night? I asked. No. I revealed the truth. You just don't like how it made you look. Grant took a step forward. You could have done this quietly. Privately. But no. You wanted the show. The drama. I nodded. You're right. I didn't want it public. Because every ugly thing you two have done to me has always come with a smile and a microphone. A backhanded comment at a birthday. A toast with a dig. A wedding speech where I was the punchline. For once, I wanted the truth to be the loudest voice in the room. He didn't respond. His fists were clenched, but he didn't move. Behind us, the cake table still sat untouched. One of the balloons tied to the chair had deflated slightly, drooping like even it didn't want to be part of the party anymore. Denise finally walked toward the exit, one slow step at a time, clutching her purse like a shield. She didn't say anything to anyone. Not even Grant. Not to me. Not even to Steve. And then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a soft, echoing click. My father turned to the remaining guests, just a few dozen now, quiet and uncertain. Thank you all for coming, he said flatly. The party's over. People didn't argue. They just started gathering their things and filtering out. Some gave me sympathetic glances. A few looked at me like I was radioactive. I didn't care. Grant walked out without a word, his wife trailing behind him, looking more confused than upset, probably wondering what secrets her marriage might be hiding. And then it was just me and Steve, and a few waiters in the distance, cleaning up spilled drinks and plates of half-eaten salmon. He finally sat down again, slowly, rubbed his forehead like it was all too much. I sat across from him. You okay? I asked cautiously. He didn't look up. I don't know. There was a long pause. I'm not your biological son, I said gently. But I never wanted that to matter to you. I wanted you to know me. See me. The way you saw Grant. His hand twitched. Then he looked at me. Really looked. And he asked the question I'd always feared, but somehow expected. So what do you want from me now, Elias? I looked at him across the table, the space between us weighed down by 3 decades of silence, missteps, and all the things neither of us ever said. My fingers tapped the side of my water glass as I thought about his question. What do you want from me now, Elias? It wasn't an easy question. A year ago, I would have said I wanted an apology. Some admission that the way I'd been treated all my life wasn't normal or fair. That being left out of family photos, plans, and holidays wasn't a coincidence. That the way I was constantly compared to Grant and always found lacking wasn't just in my head. I would have wanted him to say he was sorry for never noticing. But sitting there now, with the wreckage of my mother's retirement party still echoing in the air and the slideshow still paused on a black screen, something had shifted. I didn't want him to apologize for her anymore. I didn't want him to explain her. I didn't even need him to defend me. So I said the first thing that came honestly. Nothing. His brow furrowed. Nothing. I don't want anything, I said, quietly but firmly. Not money. Not sympathy. Not a redo. I'm not here to be adopted retroactively. I needed the truth to come out. I needed you to see it. All of it. He looked at me, searching for something in my face. Maybe anger, maybe bitterness. He probably expected a speech about how I wanted a relationship or how we could rebuild. Instead, I just sat there with my hands folded on the white linen tablecloth, calm and still. You could have told me in private, he said again, repeating what Grant had earlier. You had time. I nodded. I could have. But then it would have been swept under the rug, like everything else. She would have cried. Grant would have called me ungrateful, and you would have defended her. You know it. I know it. He didn't argue. I leaned forward slightly. Every time I stood up for myself, I was told I was being difficult. Every time I asked why I wasn't included or why I was treated like an outsider, someone made a joke or changed the subject. I was always too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. A long silence stretched between us. I'm not trying to punish you, I added, softer now. I spent most of my life wondering what was wrong with me. And the truth is, I was never broken. I was just inconvenient. Steve's eyes glistened. He looked down, fingers tightening around the armrest of his chair. I remember, he said slowly, when you were 12. You wanted to go to that writing camp in Vermont. You begged for weeks. I remembered too. I wrote an essay to get a partial scholarship. Mailed it in myself. Told my parents every day how badly I wanted to go. She said no. Steve continued, voice distant. Said it was a waste of money. Said we couldn't justify it. I nodded. Then 2 months later, Grant got that new mountain bike and a GoPro. He exhaled shakily. I should have seen it. I didn't respond. Some things didn't need agreement. Finally, he looked up. I don't know what happens now. With your mother. With us. I met his eyes. I'm not asking for anything to happen. I just wanted the truth out there. Whatever happens next is on you. He nodded slowly, almost like his neck was made of stone. You're not a regret, Elias. I gave him a faint smile. I know that now, whether she admits it or not. We sat in silence for a while. The banquet hall was nearly empty now. A few servers were folding up tables, stacking chairs. One of them accidentally knocked over a centerpiece vase, and the crash jolted both of us. But we stayed seated. Eventually, Steve stood up. You staying in town for a while? A few more days. He hesitated. Would you maybe come by the house sometime? Not for her. Just maybe we could talk. I considered it. Maybe. But I'm not going to pretend everything's fine. I'm not going to sit around and play family like this didn't happen. He nodded, solemn. I wouldn't ask you to. I stood to, adjusted my coat. All right then. He offered his hand. I looked at it for a second, then shook it. It felt strange, formal, awkward, like two businessmen shaking on a deal neither of them understood. But it meant something. Maybe not everything, but something. And then I walked out. The next morning, I woke up in the small guest room at the inn downtown. The sun was spilling in through the half-open curtains, and my phone had more notifications than I cared to read. A few were from people at the party, some saying they had no idea, that they supported me. Others were just vague, "Are you okay?" texts that I ignored. But one message stood out. It was from Steve. Just a simple. I started packing a few of her things. Don't know what I'll do yet. But I wanted you to know I believe you. And I'm sorry it took this long. I didn't reply right away. I just set the phone down, looked out the window, and breathed. For the first time in a long time, I felt still. Not vindicated. Not victorious. Just still. Later that afternoon, I walked by the old park near our neighborhood. The one where I'd played as a kid. Usually alone, since Grant didn't want me tagging along with his friends. I sat on the bench near the rusted swing set and just listened. Birds chirping. Leaves rustling. Kids laughing somewhere in the distance. It felt like closure. Not a clean one. Not the kind wrapped in a bow. But real. The truth had been set loose. And whether they liked it or not, no one could pretend anymore. A few days later, I boarded my flight back to Spain. As the plane rose above the clouds, I thought about how strange families were. How blood and last names and childhood photos didn't always mean closeness or love. Sometimes, they just meant shared history. And history, when left unchecked, had a way of rotting in the attic like forgotten boxes full of lies. I never heard from my mother again. Not directly. I found out from a cousin months later that she moved in with her sister in Arizona. Told people I ambushed her and twisted the narrative. She kept her pride. She always would. Grant sent one email, short, impersonal. Something about wishing things had gone differently. I didn't reply. But Steve? He kept in touch. A few emails at first. Then a call. Then another. We didn't rush into anything. There were no grand reunions or tearful breakthroughs. But every conversation was a step. A choice. And over time, we found something that maybe resembled what we never had before. Not a father-son bond built on obligation or tradition, but something quieter. Based on honesty. Mutual respect. A strange kind of understanding that neither of us had words for. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. And sometimes, that's all you need. My name's Daniel, I'm 26, and for most of my life, I genuinely thought that if I just worked hard enough, stayed patient enough, and kept showing up for my family, they'd eventually notice. That somewhere down the line, they'd look at me not as the awkward, quiet kid in the corner, but as someone worth being proud of. Maybe that's why I spent the better part of my 20s trying to be someone they couldn't ignore. The late nights at the library, the double shifts, the sacrifices no one ever really saw or cared to ask about. I wasn't doing it for strangers. I was doing it for the people I thought mattered the most. Graduating with my master's degree was supposed to be the moment all of that hard work finally paid off. It was a small ceremony, nothing flashy. No limos, no over-the-top celebrations, just a couple hundred students who had clawed their way across the finish line, same as me. And I wanted them there. My mom, my stepdad, my cousins, even my aunt who once joked at Christmas that I'd read so many books I'd forgotten how to be normal. I still wanted them there. So I made it as easy for them as I could. I paid for their flights. I booked their hotel rooms, making sure the hotel had a pool and was near the beach because I knew they'd complain otherwise. I even made detailed itineraries, ceremony times, recommended restaurants, directions from the airport. I could feel the exhaustion in my bones the week leading up to it. Between last-minute thesis edits, part-time work, and making sure every tiny travel detail was nailed down, I barely slept. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I told myself it would be worth it when I saw them in the crowd, clapping, smiling, finally seeing me, finally being proud. The morning of my graduation, I woke up earlier than I needed to. I stood in front of the mirror, straightening my gown, adjusting my cap, checking and rechecking my cords and stole. I even practiced a little smile, not too big, not too fake. Just hopeful. Around 9 a.m., I sent out a quick text to the family group chat. Ceremony starts at 11. Can't wait to see you all there. Thanks again for coming. I waited for the little gray bubbles to pop up. Nothing. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe they were getting ready. Maybe they were on their way. The ceremony was held outdoors, under this big white tent that flapped lazily in the coastal breeze. Families trickled in, parents holding bouquets, little siblings with homemade signs, grandparents beaming behind thick glasses. I scanned every face that arrived, feeling my heart rate pick up every time a group approached. By 10:45, my palms were sweaty. By 11 o'clock, my seat was vibrating from how hard I was tapping my foot against the metal riser. My friend Monica leaned over and whispered, "Hey, your family here yet?" I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and forced a laugh. They're probably parking. They weren't parking. They weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't lost. At exactly 11:15, as my university's president was midway through a speech about perseverance and pride, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I shouldn't have checked it. I knew that. But something gnawed at me until I did. It was a group text from my cousin, accompanied by a photo. In the photo, my family was sprawled across beach chairs on a sun-soaked shore, red Solo cups in hand, sunglasses glinting. Someone had scribbled across the sand with a stick, "Family Beach Day." Underneath the photo, my mom had texted, "We've got better things to celebrate today. So proud of everyone." My heart didn't sink, it shattered. Another message popped up. My cousin Rachel, never one to waste an opportunity to throw a jab, added, "Good luck being the smartest nobody we know." Then a bunch of laughing emojis. I don't remember much of the ceremony after that. I sat there, wooden and frozen, smiling when I was supposed to smile, clapping when I was supposed to clap, but feeling like every cell in my body was trying to shrink itself smaller and smaller. When they finally called my name, I stood up robotically, walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, and took my diploma folder. No cheering from the crowd. No whistles. No applause from my corner. Just silence. I lingered on the outskirts after the ceremony ended, pretending to check my phone, pretending to be busy, pretending not to notice the other families crowding around their graduates with hugs and flowers and proud tears. Monica and a few others invited me out to lunch to celebrate, but I declined. I made up some excuse about being tired, about needing to pack. The truth was, I couldn't bear the idea of sitting at a table, eating a meal meant for celebration, while the empty space beside me screamed the truth I'd been running from for years. They didn't care. And maybe they never had. I spent the next few days and a days, packing up my tiny apartment, filling boxes with the bits and pieces of the life I'd scraped together. Every now and then I'd get another beach photo from the family group chat, a bonfire night, a seafood dinner, even a parasailing adventure. No apologies. No explanations. Just photo after photo, like salt in a wound they didn't even bother pretending not to see. When I finally landed my first job offer, a research position at a tech firm that, frankly, I didn't even think I was qualified for, I stared at the offer letter for a long time. $18,000 signing bonus. A salary that was more money than my family combined had probably ever seen in one place. A relocation stipend, benefits, the works. And still, when I picked up the phone to call my mom, thumb hovering over her contact name, a part of me hesitated. Somewhere deep down, some rusted out, naive part of me still wanted to hear her voice light up with pride. Still wanted to hear, "I'm so proud of you, Danny." But I didn't call. I couldn't. Not after everything. Instead, I did something else. Something quieter. I took a photo of the paycheck stub when it arrived, crisp and almost unreal in my trembling hands. I composed a short message in the group chat. No anger. No sadness. No accusations. Just the photo and the words. "Thanks for the support. Hope the beach trip was worth it." I didn't stay in the chat to watch the fallout. I muted the conversation, packed the last box in my apartment, and turned the key in the lock for the final time. But by the time my flight landed in my new city a few hours later, my phone had exploded with notifications. Messages from my mom, from Rachel, from my aunt. Even my stepdad, who never texted, had sent a clumsy "let's talk" message. They begged. They pleaded. They said it had been a misunderstanding, that they didn't realize how important it was to me, that I should have said something if I was upset. Rachel even tried to joke it off, sending a gif of someone diving into a pool of money. I didn't reply. I scrolled through their desperate messages once, twice, feeling something inside me finally settle. Like the shifting of tectonic plates after an earthquake. Something irreversible. But I wasn't finished yet. In the days that followed, their messages kept coming. A steady, pathetic trickle at first, then a flood. Calls at all hours. Emails filled with guilt trips. Long paragraphs about how family forgives, and we can't let a silly misunderstanding tear us apart. My mom even tried sending old photos. Me as a kid at Christmas, me blowing out candles, me hugging my cousins at birthday parties, as if memories alone could patch the crater they'd blown open. Each message felt like someone knocking on a locked door they had kicked down themselves. At first, I just watched. I didn't respond, didn't block them yet either. I was curious, morbidly so, to see how far they would go to rewrite history. They told themselves they hadn't meant to hurt me, that it wasn't personal, that it had just been one beach day, as if that one day hadn't been the culmination of a lifetime of being sidelined, forgotten, and treated like an afterthought. And then came the real reason for their sudden concern. Rachel let it slip first, because of course she did. She texted, "Hey, you're doing well now, right? Maybe you can help out a bit?" Mom's car broke down and everyone's been pitching in. 2 minutes later, a message from my mom. "Danny, honey, it would mean a lot if you could loan us some money to get back on our feet. It's been a rough year, you know how it is." Rough year. Right. I could practically hear her voice in my head, all syrupy sweetness layered over the hard steel of expectation. Not an ounce of shame. Not an ounce of accountability. Just the same old story. Daniel will fix it. Daniel owes us. After all we've done for him. The thing was, and it still blows my mind to this day that they didn't see it. They had spent my entire life teaching me exactly what not to do. How not to treat people. How not to confuse loyalty with obligation. The temptation to just block them right then and there was overwhelming. I hovered over the block contact button more times than I could count. But I realized something. That would be too easy. Too clean. Too fast. They needed to feel it. So I replied. Just once. It was a group text. Simple. Plain. Deadly. "I'm not a bank. I'm not a doormat. I'm not your second chance. I'm done." And with that, I blocked them all. Every last one of them. My mom, my stepdad, Rachel, my aunt, even the random cousins who chimed in with their fake little "miss you, bro" texts after years of radio silence. Gone. The silence afterward was deafening in the best possible way. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought cutting them out cleanly would mean peace. And for a while, it did. I focused on settling into my new apartment, throwing myself into my new job. I met people who liked me for me, not for what I could provide or how much I could tolerate. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into a mold that never fit me. But entitlement has a way of festering. And my family wasn't the type to take no for an answer without trying to flip the board over entirely. About 3 weeks after cutting them off, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note, my mom's handwriting, looping and familiar, along with a photocopy of a family photo. The letter started off pretending to be sweet, full of "we love you" and "we're so proud." But it didn't take long to shift. She wrote about how money wasn't everything, how family was all that mattered, how I was being selfish, cruel, cold. How disappointing it was that after everything they had sacrificed for me, I would throw them away over one silly beach day. And then, buried halfway down the page, the real dagger. If you can't forgive us, maybe it's better if you just send some money so we can all move forward separately. It's the least you could do for the people who raised you. The least I could do. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, letter in one hand, the photocopied family photo in the other, and I laughed. Really laughed. Deep, uncontrollable laughter that echoed around my empty apartment. Because finally, I understood. They had never seen me as family. They had seen me as an investment. A backup plan. A future piggy bank. And when I refused to play along, when I dared to choose myself over their endless demands, I became the villain in their story. There was a time when that would have broken me. When I would have crawled back, apologized for making them feel bad, written a check just to make the guilt go away. But not anymore. Instead, I pulled out a fresh envelope. No note. No message. Just the photocopied family photo, ripped neatly down the middle. I mailed it back to the return address. And then I poured myself a drink, stood out on my tiny balcony overlooking the city skyline, and let the evening breeze wash over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to be proud of me. I was proud of myself. And that was enough. Or at least, it should have been. Because just when I thought they couldn't stoop any lower, they found a way. It started with the friend requests. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, random people popping up on my new social media accounts. People I hadn't spoken to since high school, distant relatives I barely remembered meeting at family reunions, old coworkers of my mom's. Their messages were almost laughably transparent. "Hey, your mom was just talking about you, said you're doing so well. We should catch up." Or, "Your family's really been worried about you. Maybe you should give them a chance to explain." Or, my personal favorite, "Family's family, man." No matter what. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. My mother, Rachel, maybe the whole circus, had put out feelers. They couldn't reach me directly, so they sent flying monkeys, people who didn't know the full story, who saw me as the villain because that's what they'd been fed. At first, I ignored it, deleted the requests, muted the DMs, tightened my privacy settings. But the messages kept coming, and every single one scraped at the same raw nerve. The part of me that still, deep down, hated being misunderstood. Hated being painted as cruel when all I had done was finally stand up for myself. One night, about a month after I'd sent back the ripped photo, my old high school friend Chris called me. I almost didn't pick up. The urge to stay silent, to stay safe, was strong, but curiosity won out. "Hey man," he said, a little awkwardly. "Look, I know we haven't talked in forever. I'm not trying to get in your business. Just thought you should know." He hesitated. "They're posting about you. Your cousin Rachel, your mom. Facebook, Instagram, even a couple of those old church forums your mom still lurks on. Making it sound like you abandoned them when they needed you most. Like you just turned your back on your family for no reason." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, my heart beating a slow, angry rhythm. "What exactly are they saying?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. Chris sighed. "Man, it's ugly. They're saying you got too good for your family once you got your degree. That you forgot where you came from. Your mom even posted this long thing about how she worked 3 jobs to put you through school and how you left her stranded in her old age." I almost laughed out loud at that one. My mom hadn't put a single dime toward my education. I had juggled part-time jobs, scholarships, and student loans while she and my stepdad bought new furniture and took family trips, trips that never once included me. Chris lowered his voice. They're trying to turn everyone against you, man. And some people are buying it. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. The thing about lies, especially the kind told out of desperation, is that they can only thrive where truth is absent. My family had always been good at controlling the narrative. They'd spent my entire life telling everyone what a weird, ungrateful, selfish kid I was. I just never thought they'd still be playing the same games when we were all supposed to be adults. I didn't want to engage. I didn't want to stoop to their level. But if they wanted a story, if they wanted an audience, fine. I'd give them one. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen table, cracked my knuckles, and opened a blank post. No theatrics, no cursing, no rage. Just the plain, unvarnished truth. I wrote about the scholarships, the jobs, the late nights and early mornings. I wrote about how I had saved for months to bring them out for my graduation, and how they had left me standing alone while they partied at the beach. I wrote about the text messages, the jokes, the laughing emojis. I included screenshots, not doctored, not exaggerated, just raw and damning. I wrote about how they only reached out once they realized they might benefit from my success. And finally, I wrote, family is who shows up for you, not who shows up when they want something from you. I hit post, and then I logged off. I didn't stay to watch the fireworks, but Chris sent me screenshots later, comments pouring in, mutual acquaintances asking hard questions, strangers chiming in with support. Some of the flying monkeys tried to defend my mom and Rachel, but they were drowned out by people who could see the truth for what it was. The real nail in the coffin came a few days later when my old neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, sweet but sharp as a tack, chimed in with her own story. She talked about how she used to see me dragging garbage bags full of soda cans to the recycling center for extra cash. How my mom once bragged at a neighborhood barbecue about using my scholarship refund check to treat herself to a spa day. There was no spinning it after that. My mom deleted her posts. Rachel made her accounts private. The flood of messages from distant relatives slowed, then dried up completely. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd finally slink off into whatever corner of the world would still have them, nursing their wounded pride. But, like I said before, entitlement festers. And when you take away a narcissist's golden goose, they don't just give up. They escalate. They didn't just slink away quietly. Of course they didn't. About 2 months after my post went viral enough to make them retreat into embarrassed silence, I got a letter at my new job. Not a normal letter, either. It was a formal notice. From a lawyer. My mother was threatening to sue me. The letter was filled with ridiculous claims that I had defamed her character, caused her emotional distress, that my post had damaged her reputation within the community, which was rich, considering she didn't even have a job or a meaningful community anymore. At first, I just stared at it, dumbfounded. Part of me thought it was a prank. Another part of me, the part that had spent too many years tiptoeing around her anger, felt that old, familiar spike of fear. What if she could ruin everything? What if this followed me forever? I immediately called a lawyer, a real one, and laid everything out. I showed him the post, the screenshots, the years of emails and texts backing up my side of the story. He barely hid his amusement. Let her try, he said. She doesn't have a case. This isn't defamation. This is you telling the truth. Still, to be safe, I had to spend real money. Money I could have used furnishing my apartment or paying off loans, just to draft a formal response. My lawyer sent a cease and desist right back to her lawyer, warning that if they didn't drop it immediately, I would countersue for harassment and court costs. It worked. A week later, I got a short email from her lawyer saying they were withdrawing any potential claims at this time. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. But the damage wasn't completely undone. I learned quickly that once someone shows the world they're willing to burn you to the ground for their own pride, you never really stop looking over your shoulder. I tightened all my privacy settings. I changed passwords. I flagged any mutual contacts who might leak my information. I was done giving second chances. I thought about moving again, changing cities, starting fresh somewhere they couldn't find me. But I realized something even better. I didn't have to run. They had lost access to me. They had lost the right to know where I lived, where I worked, who my friends were. They had traded proximity for lies, and I wasn't about to hand it back to them out of fear. Instead, I doubled down on building my life. Work was going better than I could have dreamed. I started climbing the ladder quickly, project lead by the end of my first year, junior manager by the middle of the second. Turns out, when you're not dragging a 30-ton emotional anchor behind you, it's amazing how fast you can move. I made friends, real ones. People who celebrated my wins without secretly resenting me. People who didn't expect me to shrink myself to make them feel better. I even fell in love. Her name was Sarah, and she had this laugh that made you feel like you'd just won a game you didn't even know you were playing. She didn't know my past at first, and when I finally told her, all of it, the messy, ugly parts, she didn't flinch. She just held my hand and said, "You deserved better. I'm glad you didn't settle for less." For a long time, I carried this heavy question inside me. Was I wrong for walking away? Was there something more I could have done? But as the years passed, as the promotions came, and the friendships deepened, and the quiet, steady joy of living an honest life without their chaos took root, the question stopped haunting me. I wasn't wrong. I was just finally free. Once, around Christmas, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a battered photo album, the same one my mom used to pull out every Thanksgiving to embarrass me in front of relatives. Inside the front cover was a single sticky note. "You'll always be part of this family, whether you like it or not." I laughed. I really, truly laughed. And then I closed the album, walked it straight to the dumpster behind my building, and let it fall into the trash with a satisfying thud. Because the truth is, family isn't who claims you. It's who chooses you. And every day I woke up surrounded by people who loved me not for what I could give them, not for the role I could play in their sad little dramas, but for who I really was. I knew I had chosen right. Years later, when Sarah and I got married, I stood at the altar without a single trace of regret. My side of the aisle wasn't packed with relatives in cheap suits forcing fake smiles. It was filled with friends, mentors, coworkers, and a few incredible souls who had become more like family to me than my blood relatives ever were. I thought maybe, for a second, my mom would try to crash it, make some grand gesture or scene. But she didn't. Maybe by then, even she realized I was no longer someone she could summon back with a few guilt-ridden words or fake tears. I never heard from her again after that last package. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. Not when promotions were announced or awards were won. And not when, years later, Sarah and I had a child of our own. I didn't send a birth announcement. I didn't feel obligated to. My son would grow up never knowing the kind of cruelty that masqueraded as family loyalty. He would never have to sit quietly at a table while the people who were supposed to love him laughed at his dreams. He would know real love, real pride, real support. And that, more than anything else, is how I won. I didn't win by getting the last word. I didn't win by fighting them until they admitted defeat. I won by living well, by thriving, by building a life so full, so rich, that there wasn't room left for their poison. Looking back now, sometimes I think about that day on the beach, them laughing, posing for selfies, thinking they were making some grand point about how little I mattered. And I just smile. Because they were right, in a way. I did become someone they couldn't recognize. Someone they couldn't control. I became someone who didn't need their approval to be happy. And nothing they could ever do will change that. Not now. Not ever. Hey Reddit, I'm a 30-year-old guy, let's call me Mike. And I've been dealing with some seriously messed up family dynamics lately. I'm not sure if I'm the bad guy here, but I need to get this off my chest. It's been building up for months, and now I've reached a point where I can't stay quiet anymore. Here's some context. I grew up in a pretty traditional household. Both of my parents, let's call them Karen and Jim, worked hard to keep food on the table. They always had a sense of entitlement when it came to things like family duty. You know, the idea that the family should always look out for each other, no matter what. They put a lot of pressure on me and my siblings to do the right thing. And while I always did what they expected, I never really bought into the whole family above all mentality. I was the quiet, responsible one. Then there's my brother, Adam. He's 2 years younger than me and has always been a little, well, reckless. Where I kept my head down and focused on my career, Adam was the kind of guy who thought rules were for everyone else. You see, Adam was never really serious about anything. In school, he barely scraped by. He couldn't keep a job for more than 6 months, and he kept bouncing from one amazing business idea to the next. Some of these ideas were honestly laughable. Like, when he tried to start a dog walking service that he totally failed at, but he made sure to post it all over social media like he was the next Elon Musk. Even his side hustles were failures. And by side hustles, I mean he sold stuff on eBay for a few months and treated it like it was his big break. But things came to a head about a year ago when Adam told my parents that he was starting his dream business. They were all over it, of course. I was skeptical, but they were convinced he had finally found his calling. He pitched it as some innovative startup in the tech industry. I didn't understand the specifics, but I wasn't really interested in the details because I figured it'd be another one of his doomed projects. That's when things started getting weird. My parents, Jim and Karen, decided they were going to help him out. They didn't ask me, didn't talk to me about it. They just did it. They spent their life savings to fund Adam's business. And by that, I mean they put everything they had into it. They didn't even blink before handing over the money. They said it was an investment in the family's future, and they expected me to be happy for Adam, to support him, to be proud. I was furious, not because I didn't want Adam to succeed, but because my parents were basically throwing away everything they had to finance a loser's pipe dream. I tried talking to them about it, but they guilt-tripped me, saying that I was being unsupportive and selfish for not helping my brother pursue his dream. I pointed out that Adam had no business sense, no plan, no real experience. But they just waved me off. He's family, Mike. We have to help him. You should want to help him, they told me. At first, I held my ground. I was angry, but I didn't want to cause too much drama. I told them that if they wanted to help him, fine, but I wasn't going to put myself in the position of bailing him out when things inevitably fell apart. They didn't listen. They were so sure he would succeed. Fast forward a few months. Adam's business is already sinking faster than a lead balloon. The entire thing was a mess. Instead of focusing on the product or any kind of strategic plan, Adam spent the money on flash and appearances, fancy office space that he couldn't afford, hiring people he didn't need, and of course, throwing launch parties that ended up being nothing more than an excuse for him to hang out with his friends. He started buying extravagant things for himself, designer clothes, expensive tech gadgets, while my parents were living on a tight budget after draining their savings to help him. I had no sympathy for him. And my parents? They didn't see it. They refused to acknowledge how reckless Adam was being with their money. But that didn't stop them from coming to me, asking for more. They started calling me every other week, saying they needed more financial help. Mike, you're doing well. We've helped you so much over the years. It's time for you to step up for your brother, they'd say. Every time I tried to explain that I couldn't just hand over money, they guilt-tripped me even harder. He's your brother, Mike. We're counting on you to help. Don't you want to see him succeed? Eventually, it reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. I tried to explain that they were enabling his behavior, that they were just perpetuating his failure by rescuing him over and over. But no matter what I said, it was always the same. You have to help. It's what family does. It was at that point that I stopped responding to their calls. I still kept my distance, but they kept pushing. Then came the final straw. One afternoon, I get this text from my mom. Hey Mike, we really need your help. Adam's business is officially bankrupt. He's broke, and we don't have the money to help him anymore. Can you please send over a few thousand to help him get back on his feet? I was done. No more being guilted into this. Instead of agreeing to give them money or even offering a compromise, I decided to make them face the reality of what was really going on. So I did something petty, something satisfying. I didn't respond right away. I waited a few days. Then, I sent them a screenshot of Adam's Instagram. It was a series of posts from his most recent vacation at a 5-star resort, posted with captions like, "Living my best life," and "Hard work pays off." I didn't say a word. I just let the images speak for themselves. I'll admit, I felt a wave of satisfaction when I hit send on that message. It wasn't just about the vacation photos, it was the culmination of everything I had been dealing with. It was the final straw, as they say. The thing that made me realize I wasn't just enabling the cycle of irresponsibility anymore. I had stopped giving in. It was a simple, petty act, but it was the most empowering thing I'd done in months. At first, I didn't hear anything from my parents. They were probably processing it, trying to figure out how to spin the situation. I knew it would take them a while to come to grips with the fact that I wasn't going to just hand over my money to save Adam from his own mess. But after a few days, the texts started flooding in. Karen, my mom, was the first to reach out. She texted me, her tone as sweet as ever, but I could feel the underlying tension. It was like she was trying to play the concerned parent card while also subtly demanding that I fall in line. She wrote, "Mike, we understand that you're upset. But Adam is family, and right now, he's going through a tough time. He needs us. He needs you. Please, don't be like this. We've always been there for you, and now it's time for you to return the favor. If you can't help him, we really don't know what we're going to do." I stared at the message for a good while. It was like a punch to the gut, even though I had been expecting something like this. The guilt trip was thick as ever, and the tone was more manipulative than I cared to admit. I wanted to respond, tell her how ridiculous the whole thing was. But I stayed silent, thinking it over. I wanted them to feel this. A few hours later, my dad, Jim, sent me a message as well. His was more direct, more forceful. I could tell he was trying to play the role of the stern father, attempting to guilt me into doing what they wanted. "Mike, we didn't raise you to act like this. We gave everything to help your brother. Everything. And now, you turn your back on us when we need you most? This isn't how family behaves. You should be ashamed of yourself." This angered me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about standing up for myself for once. I had always been the good son, the one who never rocked the boat, who did what was expected of him. But I was done with that. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into paying for Adam's mistakes anymore. I didn't respond right away. I let the messages sit in my inbox, knowing full well they were waiting for me to cave. I wanted them to stew in the discomfort of not knowing how I would react. But after a day of silence, I finally decided to hit them with something they wouldn't expect. I replied to both of them at the same time, but I kept it short. I wasn't going to waste any more energy on their manipulation. I'm not giving Adam another dime. I'm not enabling him to continue his irresponsible behavior. If you both want to continue pretending he's not at fault here, that's on you. But I won't be a part of it anymore. It was cold, it was harsh, but it felt so good to say. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing up for myself. The days after that were pure chaos. My phone was buzzing nonstop with calls and texts from my parents. They were relentless. At first, it was just more pleading, more guilt trips. My mom called me repeatedly, saying things like, "I'm so disappointed in you, Mike," or "You used to be such a caring son. I can't believe you're doing this to your family." But I didn't pick up. I let it ring, letting the guilt roll off me. The more they called, the more I felt justified in my decision. If they truly thought Adam was the one who needed help, then they should deal with him. I wasn't going to be dragged into this circus anymore. Then, the pressure escalated. One afternoon, I get a call from my aunt, who I rarely talk to. She's on my mom's side of the family, and I could tell she was just the messenger for my parents. She didn't mince words. "Mike, we've all been talking. Your parents are beside themselves. This is family, Mike. You're supposed to help when things get hard, not just turn your back on them. I know you're frustrated, but they did so much for you when you were struggling. This isn't how we treat each other." It felt like a punch in the gut, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I calmly explained the situation once again. I told her about Adam's lack of responsibility, his reckless spending, and how my parents were blindly enabling him. She didn't get it. She didn't want to get it. The family was always going to stick together in situations like this, whether it was right or wrong. She kept repeating that family helps each other, and I kept responding with the same line, not if it means enabling failure. The calls didn't stop. They kept coming, one after another, each more desperate than the last. They tried everything they could think of. Guilt trips, threats of disappointment, even using my childhood as leverage. They brought up how much they sacrificed for me when I was younger, how I owed them this one thing. I was a little shaken by the emotional manipulation at first, but it was clear that they weren't going to change. They were too deep in denial, too invested in protecting Adam from the consequences of his own actions. The more they begged, the more I felt like I had done the right thing. But just when I thought things had reached a boiling point, something unexpected happened. Adam showed up at my door. It was a Wednesday afternoon, a week after I had sent the screenshots of his vacation posts to my parents. I had just finished my lunch when I heard a knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened the door cautiously. There he was, standing on my doorstep with his hands shoved in his pockets and a sheepish look on his face. "Mike, we need to talk." I didn't even say anything. I just stepped back and let him in. Adam stepped inside, the weight of the situation hanging between us. He was always the type to act like nothing was wrong, but today, there was a noticeable tension in his posture. He wasn't his usual cocky self. His shoulders were slumped, and his eyes avoided mine, like he knew what was coming. Mike, look, he started, but I didn't let him finish. I don't want to hear any more excuses, Adam, I interrupted. I've already told you everything I need to say. You messed up, and I'm not bailing you out. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he often made when he was nervous. I get it, all right? I get it. But you're not understanding. It's not just about the money anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Then what's it about, Adam? Because as far as I can tell, this whole mess is about the money. He shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flicking around the room like he was looking for an escape. It's not like that, Mike. I've been trying to fix things. The business, I thought it was going to work. But I messed up. I know that. I made mistakes, okay. Yeah, you did, I said, my voice colder than I intended. You spent all the money on trips. You went to Vegas, Adam. Vegas? And now you want me to help you? After all of that? His face reddened, and for a second, I thought he was going to snap. But then he sighed, defeated. I don't know what you want me to say. I know I messed up, but I've got nothing left. I'm just asking for a little help. I crossed my arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. No, Adam. You've had plenty of chances to fix things. But instead of trying to work hard and make the business succeed, you chose to blow all that money on nonsense. And now you want me to clean up your mess. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. And don't even think about bringing Mom and Dad into this again. They're the ones who enabled this. They've been sending me texts, trying to guilt me into giving you money, but I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. You need to learn your lesson. There was a long silence. Adam didn't speak for a moment, just standing there, his hands in his pockets. His face contorted in frustration. I could tell he was about to say something, but then the anger shifted, and I saw something else, desperation. You're really just going to leave me hanging? He asked quietly. You're just going to let me fail? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I had already made up my mind, but seeing him like this, I felt a flicker of sympathy. He was my brother, after all. I wanted to believe he could get his act together, but I knew deep down that he had to face the consequences of his actions. If I kept bailing him out, he'd never change. Adam, this is on you, I said firmly. You can't keep running to people to solve your problems for you. You're an adult now. You need to figure this out yourself. And no amount of whining or guilt-tripping is going to change that. He stood there in silence, the words sinking in, but I could see the frustration building behind his eyes. It was as if he couldn't grasp the idea that his actions had consequences, that all of his mismanagement, all of his poor choices had led him here, and there was no easy way out. Then came the worst part. Adam's voice wavered when he spoke next. So, what? You're just going to leave me to deal with this all on my own? You don't care if I lose everything? It was a cheap shot, one I could see coming from a mile away. But even knowing that, it still hit me hard. I stared at him for a few moments, letting the silence stretch out. I knew I had to say something, but the weight of his words was making it harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could get the words out, he beat me to it. You know what, Mike? Fine. You don't want to help? That's your choice. But don't expect me to forget it. Don't think that because you're too proud to lend a hand, you're not part of the reason I'm here. I shook my head slowly. Adam, I'm not the reason. You're the reason. Your decisions got you into this mess. And you want me to bail you out? Again? After everything you've done? He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just turned away, muttering under his breath as he walked toward the door. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating, as he made his way out of my apartment. It was almost surreal, like everything was happening in slow motion. Just before he left, though, he paused and looked back at me with a smirk. I'm not done, Mike, he said. If you think this is over, you've got another thing coming. And with that, he slammed the door behind him. The next few days were a blur of emotions. After Adam left, I didn't hear from him for a while, which I thought was a good sign. Maybe he was finally processing the situation. Maybe he was realizing that he couldn't keep running away from his mistakes. But of course, that wasn't the case. About a week later, I got a text from my mom. Her message was as angry as I'd ever seen it, filled with frustration and resentment. It read, Mike, I can't believe you. Your brother's in a bad place, and you're making it worse. This is your fault. If you just stepped up and helped him, maybe things would be different. But instead, you're letting him suffer. I'm ashamed of you. That hit me harder than I'd like to admit. It was just another guilt trip, another attempt to manipulate me into doing what they wanted. But now, it didn't affect me the way it used to. I had already made my choice, and there was no going back. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into this mess. As the days passed, I kept thinking about everything that had happened. The constant texts from my mom, the guilt trips, the endless attempts to manipulate me into helping Adam, it was exhausting. I was done being the one to carry everyone else's weight. I wasn't their bailout plan anymore. It wasn't just about the money anymore, either. It was about principle. Adam's failure was his own doing, and I wasn't going to be the one to fix it for him. I'd helped in the past, more times than I cared to count. Each time, it was the same. He'd promised things would change. He'd vow he'd learn from his mistakes, but all that did was give him more chances to fail again. No more. I started ignoring my mom's texts. I didn't respond to the calls either. I knew what they wanted, and I wasn't going to give in. There was no amount of guilt they could throw at me that would change my mind. I had a life to live, and I wasn't going to let them drag me into their toxic cycle any longer. They had their own choices to make, and they were going to have to live with them. A week passed without any real communication, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd come to their senses. But then, one night, I got a phone call. I glanced at the screen. It was my mom. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and then answered. "Mike, we need to talk," she said, her voice already tinged with frustration. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't in the mood for another round of guilt trips. "About your brother. He's in over his head, Mike. He needs help," she said. "He can't do it alone. You owe it to him." I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the phone. "Mom, I don't owe him anything. He's the one who messed this up, not me. You and Dad keep bailing him out, and you're not doing him any favors. I'm not going to keep enabling this." Her tone shifted to something more pleading. "He's family, Mike. We're family. Don't you care about us? You can't just turn your back on him like this." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm not turning my back on anyone. I'm just not going to keep cleaning up someone else's mess. I've done it enough. I'm tired of being the one to sacrifice for him, to make it easier for him when he's made a choice to be reckless. I'm done." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what angle to play next. I knew she was hoping I'd cave in, but this time, I wasn't going to budge. "Mike, please, we're your family," she repeated, but there was an edge of desperation in her voice now. "You can't just abandon him. If you don't help him, we don't know what's going to happen. He's already in a bad place. What if it's too late?" My patience wore thin. It's not too late for him to take responsibility for his own actions. You want to fix things for him? Fine, but not with my money. Not with me cleaning up his mistakes. He's an adult. It's time he learns how to handle his own problems. I paused, making sure my words sank in. I'm not going to be your scapegoat. If you and Dad keep enabling him, then that's your problem. But I'm done with it. I could feel the weight of her silence over the phone, and I knew she was trying to come up with something that would change my mind. But she had nothing. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about them refusing to see that Adam's failure wasn't my fault, and it wasn't my responsibility to fix it. After a few seconds, she spoke again, quieter this time. I can't believe you're doing this, Mike. I thought you'd be there for us. I thought you were a part of this family." And with that, she hung up. It stung. Hearing her say that hurt in a way I wasn't expecting. But deep down, I knew it was the right decision. This wasn't about family loyalty anymore. This was about standing my ground. I couldn't keep giving up my time, my money, my energy for people who couldn't even acknowledge their own faults. That night, I sat there in silence, staring at my phone, thinking about everything that had happened over the last few months. I knew what I had to do, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel guilty for it anymore. A few days later, Adam tried reaching out to me again. Same story, he was struggling, he needed help, and this time he'd do better. I didn't even respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I did. I cared enough to let him face the consequences of his actions. I cared enough to stop enabling him. And just like that, the phone call stopped. The text stopped. The guilt trip stopped. They had no more leverage, no more strings to pull. I was done. I was finally free from that toxic cycle. So, Reddit, I'm asking you, was I wrong to cut them off like this? Should I have just kept helping? Or is it time to let them figure things out for themselves? Honestly, I'm still conflicted about whether I made the right call. What do you think? Christmas used to be my favorite day of the year, not for the presents. Honestly, I've always been the kind of person who finds more joy in giving than receiving. I'm Aiden, 27 years old, the quiet one in a loud family. My mom always said I was easygoing. "You never make a fuss," she'd say with that proud little nod, like it was something noble. But lately, I've started to wonder if that was just code for, You're easy to take advantage of. It wasn't always like this. When I was a kid, Christmas felt magical. The whole family squeezed into our warm living room, lights twinkling, fireplace crackling, everyone laughing too loud over eggnog and stories we'd all heard 1,000 times. But somewhere between me turning into the family's financial safety net and them pretending not to notice, that magic got smothered under the weight of expectations, mostly the ones they had of me. Last year, I paid off my brother Luke's car repairs. The year before that, I covered my aunt's overdue rent just for 1 month, which somehow turned into 12. My sister Clara called me crying when she was short on tuition, and even though I was saving for my own apartment, I wired the money without a second thought. No one ever said thank you. Not really. They just moved on. Like I was some kind of family ATM, available 24/7, no PIN required. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't do it for the gratitude. But deep down, I think I hoped, just once, they'd surprise me. Show that they saw me, that they cared, that I mattered as more than a backup wallet. So this Christmas, I decided to go all out. I'd been planning it for weeks. Handmade cards with personal notes, crisp envelopes tucked with cash for each person, not just money, but thoughtful amounts. Enough to clear debt, take a trip, or finally breathe easy. I wrapped each envelope in red silk ribbon, wrote their names in gold ink, and packed them into my bag before heading over to my mom's house. It had snowed the night before, the kind of soft, perfect snowfall that made everything feel quiet and fresh, like maybe this year could actually be different. I told myself not to expect anything, but some small, stupid part of me still hoped. When I walked in, the living room was already chaos. My cousins were tearing through presents, paper flying everywhere. Clara was squealing over her brand new MacBook, a silver one, exactly the kind she'd been dreaming about. "Oh my God, Mom, how did you know?" she gushed. My mom beamed like she'd split atoms to make it happen. Luke unwrapped the newest iPhone, still in shrink wrap. "No way," he yelled, immediately flipping the camera on to film himself. My aunt clapped like it was a game show. Everyone was loud and glowing. I stood in the doorway for a moment, snowflakes melting in my hair, clutching my carefully packed bag like it was something fragile. When it came time for my turn, my mom handed me a small gift bag. It had a bent corner and looked suspiciously familiar. I reached inside and pulled out a white mug. The same mug, in fact, that I'd given her last year. I recognized the tiny chip near the handle. It even still had the faint stain of old coffee in the bottom. "You always say you don't need anything," she said with a smile. "And you never make a fuss." Everyone chuckled politely. No one looked twice. I didn't say anything, just stared at the mug in my hands for a second too long, then set it down gently on the coffee table. My chest felt tight, not angry tight, but disappointed tight. The kind that sneaks in when you realize, slowly, that you're not invisible by accident. You're invisible because it's easier for them that way. I reached into my bag, fingers brushing against the ribbons and envelopes. I pulled them out, fanned them out like a dealer at a card table. The room quieted just a little. "Whoa, what's that?" Clara asked, eyes already sparkling like she knew. "Something I prepared," I said softly, my voice calm. I looked around the room, at the people who leaned on me, borrowed from me, depended on me. My mom was still smiling, like this was some sweet gesture. My aunt was already reaching for hers. That was when I looked down at the envelopes again and quietly slid them back into my bag. A flicker of confusion crossed my mom's face. "What's wrong, honey?" I zipped the bag shut. "Nothing," I said, standing. "Just realized something." I started walking toward the door. My boots squeaked on the floor. I could feel their eyes following me, still not quite understanding. But then I heard it, my aunt's voice, high and sharp. "Wait, where's our gift?" I turned around, the snow drifting in from the open door behind me. "You already got it," I said evenly. "I paid your rent all year." The silence was instant and heavy, like the room had been dunked underwater. Clara jumped up. "Wait, Aiden, hold on, don't be like that." My mom stood too, that overly sweet panic in her voice. "Aiden, come on. You're overreacting. Let's talk about this." But I didn't move. I didn't say a word, just turned and walked out into the snow. Behind me, I could hear them scrambling. My brother's voice, "Seriously, dude?" My aunt, "It's just a mug. Don't make it a big deal." Footsteps, crunching snow, breath in the cold air. Someone slipped behind me yelling, "Can we just get a little something, please?" I didn't even turn around. That was when I heard it, a panicked voice calling from the porch, not angry now, but pleading. Then another, and then silence. The snow muffled their voices the further I walked, like the cold itself had decided I'd heard enough. I didn't speed up. I didn't slow down. I just kept moving, one step after the next. Crunch, 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 down the long, ice-slick driveway. My breath came out in clouds, soft and steady. My fingers tightened around the handle of the bag slung over my shoulder, the one still filled with those envelopes, each one a tiny piece of me I'd been ready to give away. My car was parked under a thin sheet of frost at the end of the street. I had barely reached it when I heard someone shout again, this time closer. It was Clara. Her boots were slipping a little as she half ran through the snow, one mitten waving in the air. Aiden, wait. Just stop for a second. She sounded winded, but more than that, desperate. That tone in her voice used to be all it took to make me drop everything. I'd always been the one who came when she called. The fixer. The good one. I paused, hand on the car door. She caught up, breathing hard. You don't have to go. Look, I get it. That mug was stupid, okay? I didn't even know Mom did that. We thought you didn't care about this stuff. I turned to face her slowly. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, but there was no snow on her. Someone had clearly sent her out in a rush, a messenger from the cozy disaster behind us. Did you really think that? I asked, my voice low. That I didn't care? She looked down. I mean, you always act like nothing gets to you. Like you're fine. I nodded, more to myself than her. Because if I ever said I wasn't, nobody would have listened anyway. She winced, and for once, didn't argue. Just stood there in the snow, rubbing her hands together, eyes darting to the bag. Were those envelopes really for us? I opened the car door and tossed the bag onto the passenger seat. They were. Her eyes widened. How much? Enough to make your jaw drop, I said flatly. Enough to make your Christmas easier. To give everyone one good, guilt-free day. Clara stepped forward, reaching for my arm like we were still kids. Can't you just... Look, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to hurt you. Just come back in. At least for dinner. I stared at her hand on my sleeve. It was shaking slightly. Maybe from the cold. Maybe from the realization that something had shifted and it wasn't going back. I gently moved her hand away. You don't get it, Clara. This isn't about the mug. Or even the presents. Then what? She asked, her voice cracking. It's about how nobody in that house sees me unless they need something. It's about how I've been holding all of you up for years, and today, on the one day I hoped maybe, just maybe, you'd think about me. You gave me a coffee mug you didn't even bother to wash. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a split second, I almost caved. Almost. But then I remembered the birthday they forgot. The time I had the flu and no one called. The jokes about how I was always alone, always working. The quiet expectation that I would pick up the check again and again, with a smile and a shrug because Aiden never makes a fuss. I slid into the car and turned the key. The engine groaned, then started with a reluctant rumble. Clara took a step back. I rolled the window down an inch. Tell Mom I'll call her after New Year's. Or maybe I won't. Depends if she wants to talk. Or just ask for help again. She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait for the reply. I rolled the window up and pulled away, tires crunching over frozen gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing there, hugging her arms, her figure slowly swallowed by the falling snow. I didn't cry. I didn't blast music. I just drove. The streets were mostly empty, the world hushed under the weight of the holiday. Every light I passed shimmered like a question. What now? I didn't know exactly. I hadn't planned to walk out. I hadn't expected it to hurt and free me all at once. But as I reached the edge of town, I realized I had somewhere to go. A small cabin I'd been quietly renting an hour out. No one in the family knew about it. I'd been furnishing it little by little, saving it for someday. It had heat, a stocked pantry, a fireplace, and silence. I parked outside, stepped in, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. I lit the fire, brewed some tea, and pulled the envelopes out of the bag one by one, stacking them on the coffee table. All that generosity, redirected now. Maybe I'd donate them to a shelter tomorrow. Or maybe I'd use them to build something, just for me. For once. But just as I was about to settle in, my phone lit up. One missed call. Then 5. Then 12. My aunt. My mom. My uncle. Even Luke. And then a voicemail. I tapped play. It was my mom's voice, sharp with panic. Aiden. Listen. That rent you mentioned? You didn't cancel anything yet, did you? Because we're behind already, and the landlord, he's threatening. Please call me. We can fix this. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the red decline button. I didn't press anything. Just sat there in the glow of the fireplace, my phone screen dimming in my palm. The logs crackled softly behind me, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the heat settle into my skin, trying to let that voicemail roll off my back like water. But it clung to me. Behind already. Of course they were. I'd been paying my aunt's rent for nearly a year. My mom had begged me to step in when her job situation got complicated. I never asked for details. I didn't need to. It was always the same script. I'd wire the money. They'd sigh in relief, and nobody would mention it again. Until they needed more. But this time felt different. Not because they needed help again. That was old news. No, what stuck with me was her tone. It wasn't guilt or embarrassment. It was expectation. A subtle panic. Yes, but beneath it was a kind of certainty. That I would fix it. That I always would. I tossed the phone onto the couch beside me and leaned forward, elbows on knees. The envelopes were still sitting on the coffee table, neatly stacked, red ribbons shining in the firelight. They looked out of place in this quiet room. Out of place in my life. Now, I had thought those envelopes would bring joy, that giving them would finally make me feel included, appreciated. But what they really represented was how much of myself I'd poured into a family that saw my effort as obligation, not love. I rubbed my eyes and stood, pacing across the wood floor, the old boards creaking under my socks. I stopped at the small window and looked out. The snow had stopped falling. Everything was still, peaceful. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Then the phone buzzed again. This time, it was Luke. A text. Hey, I know things got weird. Can we talk? I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another buzz. My cousin Leah. Did you really cancel the payments? Aunt Jay's freaking out. Then, can you just call me so we can sort this out? You're being kind of dramatic. I let out a breath, half laugh, half scoff. Dramatic. That's what they called it now? I walked back over to the couch and picked up my phone again, scrolling through message after message. Some were pleading. Some were snide. One from my mom simply said, "We need to talk. This isn't like you." And she was right. It wasn't. But that was the point. I thought about Christmas mornings past. All the times I'd stayed up late wrapping gifts, or cooking when no one else would, or quietly footing bills so someone else could save face. I'd always convinced myself that love meant sacrifice, that if I just kept giving, eventually I'd be seen. But now I saw them. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a pen and notepad from the drawer, sat down at the table and started writing. Not to them. Not yet. To myself. A list. Things I've paid for without thanks. Clara's tuition, 2 semesters. Luke's car repairs, X3. Aunt Janine's rent, 10 months. Mom's credit card balance last spring. Family reunion Airbnb. Dad's overdue medical bill. Christmas dinner groceries every year since I was 21. I paused when the list hit the bottom of the page. My stomach tightened. This wasn't generosity anymore. It was servitude dressed up as love. I stood, walked to the fire, and tossed the list in. It curled into ash instantly. Just then, the phone buzzed one more time, a video call. From Mom. I stared at it, heart thudding. Let it ring. And ring. Then, finally, I answered. But I didn't say a word. I just stared into the camera. My mom's face appeared, flushed, frantic, wrapped in a knit shawl like she'd just run outside. Aiden, thank God, she said. We didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. We were counting on you. You know how tight things are. I stayed silent. You've always been the one we could rely on, she added, a soft, almost accusatory lilt in her voice. You don't understand what it's like for the rest of us. You're successful now. You are comfortable. I was comfortable, I finally said, my voice low and calm. Until I realized everyone I thought loved me was just keeping me around like a backup plan. She blinked. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is paying for your sister's rent, your daughter's education, your son's toys, your groceries, and getting a used mug in return. What's not fair is never being invited to be part of the family, unless it's to bail you all out. She went quiet. Then, so what? You're cutting us off? Just like that. I looked her in the eye, and that's when I told her, I'm done being the safety net. Her mouth parted slightly, like she hadn't expected me to actually say it. She blinked, and then the excuses started flowing. We've just been under so much pressure this year, Aiden. You know how hard it's been. The economy, your aunt's health, your brother's job situation. I held up a hand. I know. I really do. But the thing is, Mom, it's always something. Every year. Every holiday. Every phone call. And you've never once asked if I'm okay. If I need anything. You just assume I'll carry the weight. That's not true, she said, almost reflexively. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you called just to talk? Just to check in on me, not on my bank account? When was the last time anyone did? Her face tightened. We love you. Of course we do. You love what I do for you. That's not the same thing. She shook her head. I think you're being cruel. We're family. And I think you're confusing love with access. I said, my voice firm but calm. And access has been revoked. There was silence on the other end. Just the faint sound of wind through the trees outside her house. She didn't hang up. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, like she didn't recognize the person speaking. And in a way, she didn't. Because I had spent years training them all to treat me this way. By never saying no. By always stepping in. By smiling through the disappointment. I had let them build a version of me that existed solely to serve them. And they believed in that version so long. They didn't know what to do now that he was gone. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. But I am doing this for me. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg. I didn't give her the chance. I ended the call. And then I turned off the phone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the immediate weight of guilt pressing down on me. No tight knot in my stomach. No voice in the back of my head whispering that I was being selfish. Just stillness. A clean silence that didn't demand anything from me. I turned back to the fire. The cabin was warm now, glowing. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the envelopes. One by one, I untied the ribbons and opened them. Thick stacks of hundreds, thousands of dollars, ready to be handed out like peace offerings. But not anymore. Instead of throwing them away, I did something else. I relabeled each envelope with names that had nothing to do with my family. Names of local organizations I'd researched weeks ago, a women's shelter in town, a food pantry, a youth mentorship program that needed laptops. I hadn't been sure before, but now I was. That night, I wrote out handwritten notes and slid them into the envelopes with the cash. I addressed the letters not to the directors or managers, but to the people receiving the help, strangers I would never meet. I didn't want credit. I just wanted the money to do something good for once. The next morning, Christmas Day, I drove into town early. The streets were still quiet, dusted with snow, the sun barely peeking over the rooftops. I slipped the envelopes into mail slots and drop boxes, my breath misting in the cold. At the last stop, the shelter, a woman in a long coat was sweeping the sidewalk. She looked up and smiled at me, the kind of simple, genuine smile that felt rare. "Merry Christmas," she said. "Merry Christmas," I replied. When I got back to the cabin, I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. I sat by the fire and read a book I hadn't had time for in months. No noise. No chaos. No obligations. Just peace. But of course, the silence didn't last forever. 2 days later, I checked my email for the first time since the walkout. There were over 40 new messages. Some from family. Some from unknown addresses, forwarded voicemails, even a couple of messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Word had gotten around. I ignored most of them, but one stood out. It was from my cousin Leah. The subject line was simple. "I'm sorry." I clicked it. "Aiden, I didn't know what was going on. I knew you helped sometimes, but I didn't realize how much. I think we all just assumed you were fine, that it didn't cost you anything. That was wrong. I'm not writing to ask you for anything. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did do, and I'm sorry for not seeing you before now. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No strings. Leah." I stared at the message for a while. It didn't undo anything. It didn't erase the years of being overlooked or used. But it was something. A small sign that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally looked past what I gave and saw me. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't ready. And I didn't owe anyone my time anymore, not on demand. But I saved the email. Days passed. New Year's came and went. I didn't get the usual group call at midnight. No blurry video of fireworks from someone's backyard. It was strangely quiet. And I loved it. By mid-January, I'd made arrangements to cut off every recurring payment I'd set up for family members. Bank accounts were frozen. Auto pays canceled. When I called the landlord covering my aunt's apartment, I was polite but firm. I'm no longer responsible. Any questions can be directed to her. He didn't argue. He just updated the file. That week, the calls started again. Not just from my aunt, but from my mom, Luke, even my dad, who rarely called anyone. Each one went to voicemail. On a Thursday afternoon, I walked into a local volunteer center and signed up to mentor teenagers interested in technology. I had always wanted to give back in a way that meant something, not just handing over money, but actually showing up. My first mentee was a 16-year-old named Bryson. Smart kid, quiet like I was at that age. In our second meeting, he asked why I was doing this. I shrugged. Because someone should. He grinned. You're not like most people. For the first time in a long time, I smiled without faking it. Neither are you, I said. Weeks passed. Then a month. The calls trickled off. A few bitter texts slipped in. But mostly, the silence held. Until Valentine's Day. A single card came in the mail. No return address. Just a Hallmark envelope with glittery hearts. Inside, a note written in my mom's handwriting. Aiden, I'm sorry. Not because you're gone, but because I didn't see what I was doing until you left. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm trying to be better. Not for what I lost, but for what I could still become. I folded the card slowly, set it on the mantel. I didn't know if she meant it. I didn't know if she'd change. But for the first time, it didn't matter. Because I had. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I was living my life, finally, on my own terms. And the next Christmas? I didn't go back. I spent it in that same quiet cabin, wrapped in a soft blanket by the fire, drinking hot cocoa from the same chipped mug they once re-gifted me. Not out of spite, but because it reminded me of who I used to be and how far I'd come. My name is Sarah, and I'm 27. I've never been the one to back down, especially when it comes to family drama, but this was a whole new level of messed up. It all started at my cousin Emily's wedding. Now, weddings are supposed to be these joyful, celebratory occasions, right? But for me, it was the beginning of a chain of events that ended up changing everything. I've never felt more betrayed by my family than I did that day. Let me rewind a little to set the stage. I've always been the problem child in the family, at least. That's how my dad likes to label me. I'm the black sheep, the one who didn't follow the perfect life script that everyone else seemed to stick to. I didn't go to college right away. I started working at a coffee shop instead of pursuing a traditional career, and I never really fit in with the cookie-cutter mold of what my dad wanted for me. But despite all that, I tried to maintain a good relationship with my family. I always showed up for family events, even if they didn't approve of the choices I was making. I thought, maybe if I kept putting in the effort, they'd start to see things my way. Boy, was I wrong. Emily, my cousin, is 2 years younger than me. We used to be really close growing up, but as we got older, we kind of drifted apart. She went on to become the perfect daughter in my dad's eyes, graduating college, getting married to the right guy, and living this picture-perfect life. I tried to be happy for her. I really did. But when I got the invitation to her wedding, I had this gnawing feeling deep down that something wasn't quite right. The invitation came through the mail, and I remember opening it, feeling a mix of emotions. Of course, I was happy for Emily, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't exactly welcomed. The wedding was being held at some fancy estate out of state, and I knew my dad was helping with the costs. He had mentioned it to me a few weeks prior. But there was something about the way he said it that made me feel like he thought I should somehow be grateful. Grateful for what? Supporting me financially after years of barely acknowledging my existence? When the day of the wedding came, I showed up, wearing my best dress and trying to put on a smile. But as soon as I walked in, I could feel the tension. Emily, who I once thought of as a close friend, barely acknowledged my presence. She wasn't rude, exactly, but it was clear she wasn't happy to see me. Her mom, my Aunt Linda, was giving me these side-eye glances throughout the evening, and it felt like everyone in the room was judging me. I couldn't quite figure out what had changed. One minute, we were inseparable, and the next, I was a stranger to her. The real punch to the gut came when the reception started. I was sitting at a table, talking to some distant relatives I hadn't seen in years, when my dad walked over to me. He was frowning, looking like he'd just bitten into a lemon. "Why don't you come sit with us?" he said in a voice that was barely above a whisper, but with an edge of frustration. I raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" "You're not sitting with the family," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder as if to check if anyone was listening. I was taken aback. "Dad, this is my family too." He shook his head. "Not anymore. You know that." You should have made more of an effort to get along with Emily. And now look, she's getting married, and you're still out here, acting like you're not part of this. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't the first time my dad had made comments like this, but it hit differently that day. The hurt I felt was like a heavy weight in my chest. I didn't even know how to respond. Before I could say anything, he walked off, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. The night went on, and I tried to keep my distance, not wanting to make a scene, but the whole thing just fell off. The tension kept building, and I started to realize I was being left out on purpose. Emily wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She wasn't the sweet, welcoming cousin I once knew. She was acting like I was some sort of inconvenience. And then came the final straw. After the reception, everyone gathered around the gift table. My dad, who had been talking to Emily's parents for a while, suddenly pulled me aside. "Sarah, we need to talk." I looked at him, already bracing myself for whatever he was about to say. "What's going on?" His face was red, his jaw clenched. "You didn't even give Emily a wedding gift. That's disrespectful. You can't keep doing this, Sarah. You can't keep acting like the world owes you something. You've been living off my money for years now, and this is how you repay me." I blinked in shock. "Dad, no, don't try to justify it," he interrupted, his voice rising. "I've been supporting you financially, and you can't even show some basic decency. You didn't even give your cousin a gift." I felt my stomach drop. "You've been supporting me? I didn't ask you to." "You know what?" he snapped, cutting me off. "I don't want to hear it. You think I don't notice? I notice everything. I've been trying to help you, and this is how you repay me. It's insulting." I was seething now, but I didn't know what to say. The words were stuck in my throat. My emotions were a tangled mess, and I didn't want to cause a scene in front of everyone. But at that moment, something inside me snapped. For years, I've been trying to get their approval, trying to fit into this family that never really saw me for who I was. And here it was, the last straw. "Fine," I said, my voice low but steady. "If that's how you feel, then I'll take my leave." His face was a mix of disbelief and anger as I turned to walk away. "What? Where are you going?" "I'm done," I said, barely able to control the wave of emotion crashing over me. "I'm done trying to get your approval. I don't need it." I left the wedding that night with my head held high, but inside, I was torn apart. It felt like I had just walked away from the one thing that had been holding me back for so long, the hope that my family would ever see me for who I truly was. But deep down, I knew it was the right decision. It had to be. It wasn't over, though. That night was just the beginning. The phone calls and messages started flooding in. My dad, my aunt, and even Emily were trying to call me, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready to talk to any of them yet. I couldn't. They had taken so much from me, and I needed space. Then, a few days later, I got a text from my dad. "I hope you're happy with the way you've treated me. You've made your bed, now lie in it." And that's when the real plan started to form. I sat there staring at the text for what felt like an eternity. "You've made your bed, now lie in it." My dad had always been a master of guilt tripping, but this one hit harder than any before. It stung, but also gave me a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. For years, I've been trying to please them, to live up to their impossible expectations. I've been walking on eggshells, terrified of disappointing them. But at that moment, it was crystal clear. I didn't owe them anything. I had to make a choice. I couldn't just let this slide. If I was going to cut ties, I needed to do it in a way that would make them realize the gravity of the situation. I wasn't just a pawn in their game anymore. I was done being their punching bag. The days following the wedding were a blur. The guilt from my dad's text continued to eat at me, but I refused to respond. It was hard. I'm not going to lie. There were moments when I almost caved. The messages from my Aunt Linda, the calls from Emily asking why I wasn't responding, it all felt like a weight on my chest. But every time I picked up my phone, I thought about the look on my dad's face that night at the wedding, the disappointment in his eyes as if I had betrayed him. I was done with it. But I couldn't just cut them off without making sure they understood why. It was the following Saturday when the real turning point came. My dad called me, his voice rough with frustration, but there was a hint of desperation too. "Sarah," he started, his tone softer than usual, "I'm trying to fix this. We need to talk. This is tearing the family apart." I let out a deep breath. I had been preparing myself for this moment, but hearing his voice made me shiver. "Dad, I don't want to talk right now. You've made it clear how you feel about me. You've made your feelings perfectly clear, and I don't want to hear any more about how I'm disappointing you." He let out a sigh, almost as if he was giving up. "You really think I don't care?" I've done everything for you, and this is how you repay me? You're throwing it all away. I've been paying for everything, your rent, your bills, your car payments. Don't pretend like this doesn't mean something. Actually, I said, cutting him off. I have been pretending, but not anymore. I paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. You think it's just about money? I continued, my voice growing stronger. You think that just because you've been giving me money, you get to control my life? I've been living like this for years, and you never once saw me for who I was, just a project. A project you could control with your cash. Well, I'm done being your project. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I almost thought he had hung up on me, but then he spoke again, his voice shaking. Sarah, please. This is your family. We've always been there for you. And you're going to throw it all away for what? Some dumb principle. I felt a deep laugh bubble up in my throat, but I swallowed it. It's not a dumb principle, Dad. It's my life. It's about me finally standing up for myself, and I don't need your money or your approval to do that. I've been stuck in this cycle for too long, and I'm done. I paused again, letting the silence settle in before adding the final blow. And just so we're clear, I'm cutting off all financial support from you. I don't want anything from you anymore. Not a cent. Not a favor. Nothing. His voice cracked as he tried to defend himself, but I wasn't listening anymore. I had made up my mind. The next few days were a whirlwind. The fallout from my decision hit me hard. My dad didn't take it well. He didn't even try to hide his rage when I told him I was cutting him off. He bombarded me with angry texts, trying to guilt-trip me into coming back. You're ruining everything, he'd write. You've destroyed the family. But this time, it didn't affect me the way it used to. I wasn't going to apologize. I wasn't going to back down. And then came the surprise. Emily, who had been so cold toward me at the wedding, suddenly reached out. Her message was short but direct. What did you do? Why are you causing all this drama? I didn't even have to think about it. I replied, my fingers typing with a clarity I hadn't known I had in me. I'm done being your scapegoat, Emily. I'm done pretending like I'm not just here to make your perfect little life look even better. You think this is just about money? It's not. It's about respect. It's about finally standing up for myself. There was no reply. Not immediately, at least. But I knew Emily. She would process it in her own way, probably start telling everyone how unreasonable I was being. That was the pattern. She'd play the victim and make me the villain, just like my dad did. But I didn't care anymore. I was finally free. Then came the final moment I had been dreading, but also secretly waiting for. My dad showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding on my door with fury in his eyes. I had seen him angry before, but never like this. I wasn't sure if I should open the door or call the police. But in the end, I opened it, facing him with a resolve that shocked even me. Sarah, what do you think you're doing? He barked, stepping into my doorway. I stood my ground. I'm doing what I should have done years ago. I'm standing up for myself. You're destroying this family, he shouted, his voice full of rage. After everything I've done for you, after all the sacrifices, this is how you repay me? I could feel the old guilt rising in my chest, but I quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about him. It was about me. I don't need your sacrifices anymore, Dad. I'm done. He stared at me, his face contorted in disbelief, before finally turning on his heel. You'll regret this, he spat. You'll see. And just like that, he was gone. But I wasn't the one regretting anything. I was free. The silence in my apartment was deafening after my dad stormed out. I stood there for a moment, not sure if I was supposed to feel guilty, scared, or relieved. But as the seconds stretched into minutes, all I felt was calm. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life, like I wasn't just a piece in their game. But the calm didn't last long. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of texts. Some from family members, some from my dad, all demanding answers. My Aunt Linda was the first one to message. Sarah, what on earth is going on? Your father's in tears. This is not how you treat family. Call me. I scrolled past her message, not feeling the slightest bit of guilt. Then came Emily's. You seriously went this far? Are you trying to destroy everything? You've ruined the wedding. You've ruined everything. I didn't reply to any of them. I wasn't interested in their opinions anymore. But then, I got a call from my dad. I hesitated for a second, but I knew what was coming. I answered, my voice steady but firm. Dad, don't dad me, he snapped. You don't get to just cut me off like this. After everything I've done for you, after everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me. I felt my anger rising again, but I kept my cool. You didn't sacrifice anything for me, Dad. You used me. You controlled me. And I let you. But not anymore. You'll regret this, he said again, his voice low and threatening. You're destroying your future. I won't bail you out anymore. Don't come running to me when you need help. The weight of his words was heavy, but I didn't let it break me. I won't need your help, Dad. I've got this. With that, I hung up. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of phone calls, messages, and visits. My dad didn't give up easily. He kept trying to manipulate me, telling me how ungrateful I was, how unreasonable I was being. He even threatened to cut me out of the family will. At first, I thought the idea of losing any inheritance would hurt, but it didn't. It didn't matter. I didn't want anything from him anymore. Then came something unexpected. Emily, who had been quiet for a while, reached out again. This time, her tone was different. It wasn't angry or accusatory. It was almost pleading. Sarah, please. Can we just talk? I stared at the message for a while, unsure what to make of it. Emily had never been the one to back down, never the one to apologize. But something felt off this time. I debated whether to respond, but my curiosity got the best of me. I typed back, "What do you want, Emily?" She replied quickly, "I don't know how to fix this, but you need to come to your senses. You're pushing everyone away. Don't do this. Don't make it permanent. Just come back and apologize." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. The nerve of her to say I needed to apologize. After everything that had happened, she still thought I was the one who needed to make things right. "No, Emily," I typed, keeping my voice even. "I'm not apologizing for standing up for myself. I'm not going to be your scapegoat anymore. I'm done trying to make everyone happy. You can't make me feel bad for finally putting myself first." The silence that followed was deafening. She didn't reply for hours, and when she finally did, it was a single message. "You're making a mistake." But this time, I didn't care. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. The days passed, and I continued to live my life. For the first time in forever, I wasn't constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. I didn't have to worry about my dad showing up at my door, demanding answers. I didn't have to worry about Emily guilt-tripping me into giving in. I was free. But then, one evening, my doorbell rang. It was unexpected, and I wasn't prepared for it. When I opened the door, there was my dad, standing on the other side, looking like he had just walked through a storm. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his face red with anger and exhaustion. I didn't say anything either, waiting for him to speak. Finally, he sighed and looked down at the ground. "I'm not here to fight with you, Sarah." I didn't know what to say. My emotions were a whirlwind. Did he want to apologize? Did he finally realize what he had done to me? Or was this just another attempt to manipulate me? He continued, his voice quieter than before. "I know I've been hard on you. But you have to understand, everything I've done because I care about you." I almost laughed at how predictable he was. "No, Dad. You've done everything because it was easier for you to control me. It wasn't about me. It was about you. About keeping things the way you wanted them." His eyes hardened, and I could see the anger flare up again. "You have no idea what it's like to care for someone like I've cared for you. I've sacrificed so much, and you're just throwing it away." I felt angry, but I held myself together. "You don't get to play the martyr, Dad. You don't get to tell me how to live my life anymore." For a moment, we just stood there, the tension so thick it felt like we were in a pressure cooker. And then, in a move I hadn't expected, my dad dropped his shoulders and let out a deep breath. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me," he said, his voice raw. "I'm just asking you to come back. To stop acting like you're alone in this." I didn't know what to say. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, but I knew the answer. "No, Dad. I'm not coming back. Not like this. I'm done." He stared at me, his face unreadable, and for a second, I thought he was going to lash out again. But instead, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, feeling both triumphant and hollow. I had stood my ground, but at what cost? It was the strangest feeling watching my dad walk away. Part of me expected some huge emotional breakdown, a last-ditch effort to make me feel guilty enough to cave. But as I stood there, watching his retreating figure, I felt nothing but a quiet sense of finality. This chapter of my life, one where I was constantly walking on eggshells, second-guessing every decision I made to avoid angering him, was officially over. The weeks that followed were a mix of weird calm and tension-filled quiet. My family didn't stop trying to get me to reconcile. Emily called a few more times, but each time, I ignored her. My Aunt Linda sent a couple of emails, asking me to reconsider, but I just deleted them. They were all stuck in their bubble of what they wanted, and I wasn't going to be the person who caved to their pressure anymore. I got a few more texts from my dad. One of them said, "You're going to regret this. You've lost more than you realize." Another one came a week later. "This is your final chance to make things right." Each time, I felt a little less tempted to respond. I had been living my life for them, bending to their will, for so long that I barely knew who I was anymore. But with each passing day, it became clearer to me that I was stronger than I thought. I was building my own future now, and I wasn't going to let them destroy it with guilt trips and manipulation. But the final blow came one afternoon, almost a month after the whole fallout. I got a call from Emily, her voice shaky and desperate. "Sarah, please. You don't understand. Dad's really sick. He's been in the hospital for a few days now, and no one knows what's going on. Mom says he's been asking for you." My heart stopped for a moment. The numbness that had been building inside me cracked just a little. It wasn't that I didn't care. Of course I cared. But this was my dad, the same man who made me feel like nothing more than a pawn in his game. The same man who constantly pushed me to the edge and then pulled away, expecting me to chase after him. Still, there was that nagging voice inside my head, the part of me that had been trained to drop everything when he needed me. "Sarah, you have to be there for him. He's your father. You can't just leave things like this." I sat down on the couch, staring at my phone. It was like that moment in a movie where everything slows down, and you can feel the weight of the choice ahead of you. I thought about what I had gone through, what he had put me through, and I felt a flicker of anger rise again. I had given him years of my life, and he had thrown it all away in pursuit of his own needs. But then, something inside me shifted. I realized that I wasn't going to go back to the old Sarah, the one who sacrificed everything to please others, the one who let herself be manipulated and pushed around by guilt. That person wasn't me anymore. "I'm sorry, Emily. I can't do it. I just can't." The words felt right. They were freeing. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with my decision. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she replied, her voice small and defeated. "I understand. You've made your choice." And that was it. I never heard from my dad again. Not after the hospital incident. Not after the constant texts and calls demanding I come back. It was over. As time passed, I moved on with my life. I didn't have to worry about walking on eggshells anymore. I was free to live on my terms, without the constant fear of disappointing someone who had never truly cared about me in the first place. I built new relationships, ones based on mutual respect, not control. I focused on my career and my personal growth. I learned to love myself again, something I hadn't done in years. And in the end, the message was clear. Standing up for myself was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was the most rewarding. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and finally choosing my happiness over the toxic patterns of the past. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it.